there to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller is out of town this week, so filling in for him, we have Whitney Washington, staff for Alabama Arise and member of CWA Local 3908. Today on the program, we learn why it's bad, actually, that McKinsey is in place to shape Alabama's new economy. The Alabama Public Service Commission added another energy tax. Mercedes is backpedaling. People don't understand economic numbers about the minimum wage. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week and we might answer it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. You can subscribe to our newsletters there and navigate to a bunch of other stuff. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to make a one-time or recurring monthly contribution, you can do that at tvlr.fm/donate. You can also go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report if you are more familiar with that interface. You can also go to our store, tvlr.fm/store, and buy our caps. We have a new round of our logo caps. They're black with the TVLR logo on it, $35 plus shipping. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then you could think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that. And we are coming up on something of financial, some financial issues. So it would really help if your local sponsored the show. So again, reach out to us for more details on that. You can do that at tvlr.fm/contact.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who believe that Alabama and the South labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
And without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump right into last week in Southern labor. So here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from June 14th to June 21st. In an extremely slow week for new union elections, 42 workers across 4 bargaining units filed for a union election. Another bargaining unit filed and withdrew in the same week, and Unfortunately, 42 workers are also now in the middle of a decertification campaign. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Teamsters. Local 245 is the union representing 42 workers at Rayco Granning Suspensions in Mount Vernon, Missouri. 14 workers at Intralot in Baton Rouge, Louisiana filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 995. 6 workers at Lee County Electric Cooperative in North Fort Myers, Florida filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 1933. 12 workers at Corporacion Sanos in Caguas, Puerto Rico filed a petition to hold a union election with ULEES. 8 security guards at Paragon Systems in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with Union Rights for Security Officers, but withdrew the petition in the same week. 10 workers at Southwestern Electric Power Company in Texarkana, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 386. In campaign updates, lest we fall into despair from the disaster unfolding among the public sector labor movement in Florida, friend of the show Chris Townsend pointed out in a recent article that a mirror image is unfolding in Virginia, where some 50,000 public sector workers have quietly organized. Workers at Mercedes report that the company is already backtracking on promises to make work better and attempting to blame it on the union, even though the union is not there. That's pretty funny how that works. UAW President Shawn Fain dispelled those myths in a letter that was made public last week. In election results, 442 workers across 4 bargaining units unionized last week, with 178 workers in 3 units opting against unionization, and 14 workers in 1 unit withdrew their election petition. 201 workers at Austin Pets Alive in Austin, Texas voted 81-35 in favor of unionization with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 41 workers at CBD Kratom in St. Louis, Missouri voted 23-6 in favor of unionization with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 655. 5 workers at Spire, Alabama voted against unionization with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 548. 190 workers at American University voted in favor of unionization with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU Local 500. 55 workers at ADT in Lafayette, Louisiana voted 17-30 against unionization with the Communication Workers of America. 10 workers at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits in Lexington, Kentucky voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 651. 118 workers at Corning Distribution Center in Tarboro, North Carolina voted 47-63 against unionization with the United Steelworkers, USW, and 14 workers at Intralot withdrew their petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 995. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, the Federal Labor Relations Authority determined that there is evidence that the EEOC is violating federal law by refusing to share the results of an office climate survey requested by the union. In strikes and bargaining updates, Railroad Workers United are renewing their calls for unity in the upcoming rail negotiations as the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers unions continue to feud. They have launched a petition being signed by rank-and-file railroaders. United Campus Workers Southeast will be hosting their founding annual convention on July 12th through the 14th in Birmingham to merge all of the groups in the southeastern United States into one local union. Truckers Movement for Justice will begin a convoy on July the 1st in Texas to protest against poor working conditions and blacklists. 4,000 workers, members of Unite Here Local 25 in the hospitality industry in Washington, D.C., ratified a new 4-year agreement with the 25% wage gains and an expanded pension. Nurses at HCA-owned hospital Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, rallied on Juneteenth to protest the hospital's bargaining position in contract negotiations ahead of the current contract expiration date of July the 1st. The nurses are bargaining for more breaks while the hospital is focusing on getting concessions. Journalists at 8 Tribune companies, including the Orlando Sentinel, the Tidewater, the Virginian Pilot, Daily Press, the Virginian Gazette, and Tidewater Review, and members of the News Guild CWA ratified a first contract that includes higher job security, better pay, and better leave packages. In political and legislative updates, the Alabama Supreme Court says landlords have a duty to fix open and obvious issues. That's interesting, and it doesn't sound exactly like, it's different from the way that it sounds. So the argument that the defendant was making, the landlord, was saying that, look, the tenant got this place and they saw the issues and they still rented it. So, that waives our liability. We don't have to fix it because it was like that when when the tenant came in. And the Alabama Supreme Court says, no, that's actually not the case. If there's an issue, even if it is obvious and open, when the tenant comes in, you still have to fix it. In the Alabama prison labor lawsuit, the judge has refused to issue an injunction against the state of Alabama while the case proceeds. Despite this less than ideal news, the plaintiffs in the case cite reason for hope, noting that since the suit was filed, the rate at which the parole board has granted parole has quadrupled. Huntsville State Senator Sam Gavan has pre-filed a bill to give teachers access to workers' compensation. Only 24% of eligible Alabama families are actually served by a program that provides subsidized child care. Parents can apply through the Alabama Department of Human Resources. The Alabama Public Service Commission approved a new tax on solar energy production without public comment or hearing. Missouri tradeswomen issued a letter attacking U.S. Senator Josh Hawley for his support for Harrison Butker's sexist speech at a college graduation. AFGE members are sending letters to their congressional representatives urging passage of the FAIR Act, which would give federal employees a raise of 7.4% in an attempt to narrow the widening gap in pay between private sector and federal workers. Private sector workers now make 27% more for similar work than federal workers, up 23% from 2022. According to a new survey conducted by the Veterans Affairs Administration between January 1st and March 31st, 2024, 80% of veterans said they trusted the VA to fulfill the country's commitment to veterans, and 91.8% of veterans said they trust the VA healthcare. That is it in labor updates from the South last week. If we missed anything, let us know. TVLR.fm/contact, and we will try to include it on the next update. We're going to be right back talking to Gabriella Spielberg about McKinsey and why it's bad. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Cure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Cure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my fill-in co-host, Whitney Washington, member of CWA Local 3908. We appreciate her hanging out with us today. Just wanted to say, appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got some 25 people watching us on YouTube. If you haven't liked the stream, go ahead and do that. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everybody tuning in on Facebook as well. In the YouTube chat, we have Lil Jimmy. Adam from Portland is tuning in, saying appreciate everybody for helping out in his absence. Dwayne, Dr. Mad, and also, this is a very funny screen name, The Carrie Lake Show with guest host Ken Ham. That is, I would listen to that. And they say, The Carrie Lake Show with guest host Ken Ham says, good morning from UAW Region 6 Summer School in Pico Rivera, Los Angeles. Very cool, very cool. And Penelope says, good morning. Yeah, so very, very cool. Appreciate the listenership of the Carrie Lake Show with guest host Ken Ham. Really quickly, before we get to our guest, I wanted to dive just a little bit deeper. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we mentioned in Last Week in Southern Labor this new solar tax from the Alabama Public Service Commission. And so the long and short of it is, the state of Alabama is raising energy prices. Now, that might not sound right,
given, all of the noises that the state makes, in particular, the Public Service Commission, the body charged with regulating utilities in Alabama. That might not sound right given all the noises that they make about keeping energy costs low and fighting Joe Biden's attempt to raise your utility bills. But that's exactly what's happening, and I want to give a shout out to friend of the show, Energy Alabama, for pointing this out to us. Now, longtime listeners will know that the Public Service Commission already has a tax on solar power production. We've talked to Daniel Tate about this multiple times in the past, but they have, in March, implemented yet another tax on this renewable energy resource. So this from Energy Alabama. Effective April 1st of 2024, Alabama Power significantly reduced the rates that it pays to independent power producers like solar farms, and introduced a $0.00193 per kilowatt hour fee on large-scale energy projects not owned by Alabama Power. Now, they explained that may not sound like much, but if you consider an example of an 80-megawatt solar farm in Montgomery, the new tax amounts to a $250,000 fee annually. Every single year, an additional $250,000 fee for such a project. Okay, so a tax of that size could very well completely derail the financials of a solar project and could threaten investment. For example, as Energy Alabama points out, Meta is investing in Montgomery, building out data centers. They have pledged to operate their new Alabama data center with clean energy, but this new solar tax could potentially derail that construction and kill those jobs. Energy Alabama further explains that the new fee joins Alabama Power's already contentious solar tax on residential and small commercial solar users. The existing tax charges $5.41 per kilowatt hour per month, or per kilowatt per month, which is about 50% of what someone could expect to make from selling their energy to the grid. GASP, represented by the Southern Environmental Law Center, is challenging this tax in federal court, which significantly increases costs for residences and small businesses with solar panels and reduces most financial benefit. I mean, a 50%, cutting in half what you could expect to make off of generating your own power. So the new tax, on top of what I just described, the new tax was unanimously approved by the Alabama Public Service Commission, led by Republican Commissioners Twinkle Cavanaugh, yes, that's her real name, Jeremy Oden, and Chip Beaker in March, without public comment. And that part, having the new tax instituted without public comment, that is what is forming the basis for an additional legal action that Energy Alabama is taking against the new tax. So the Public Service Commission's decision to bypass any public involvement has drawn significant criticism, according to Energy Alabama, and they assert that the Commission's actions violate the 14th Amendment's due process clause, arguing that Alabama Power provided insufficient evidence for its rate changes, relying only on a cover letter without detailed supporting data. The organization states that a 50% reduction in purchase rates with less than 30 days notice and no opportunity for public participation does not meet basic due process standards. So very concerning stuff there. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to energyalabama.org/AlabamaPower_tax. energyalabama.org/AlabamaPower_tax. Okay, so I was mention about the McKinsey. That's what we're going to be talking to Gabriella Spielberg about. And, amid the state of Alabama's frenzied campaign against the UAW during the Mercedes union election, some news slipped out that has gone rather unremarked on. That is that the state is creating a new strategic economic plan. And to do this, they have hired management consulting firm McKenzie & Company. as far as I can tell, there has only even been one article about this, and that article being in WBHM under the headline, Alabama to begin working with a consulting company that's under criminal investigation. So if that concerns you, it should. But despite the fact that McKinsey is currently under criminal investigation, spokespersons for the state said that they maintain, quote, full confidence in McKinsey, and no one else in the media in the state has mentioned it. So, to try to right that wrong and explain to folks just how very bad McKinsey is and why it should concern you that they are being hired for the project of basically creating Alabama's economy for who knows how much, by the way, we have on the line Gabriella Spielberg. Gabriella Spielberg is a freelance journalist who recently did a video for More Perfect Union about the management consulting firm McKinsey, and she joins us now. Gabby, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk to you about this, and what I wanted to start off our interview with playing for you the clip that alerted me to the fact that Alabama's new economy is going to be shaped by McKinsey. This was an interview that Commerce Department Secretary Ellen McNair did on Capital Journal, which is kind of one of the state's premier political television programs. Also on public television in Alabama, might I add, and it was very frustrating.
It literally films at the State House, like
yes,
in the basement of the State House. Like,
so
it is, yeah.
Our tax dollars pay for this, and the vast majority of this interview was just the Commerce Secretary saying how bad unions are, and Capital Journal did not give the union or union supporters the opportunity to respond. So I just love the fact that my tax dollars went to fund anti-union propaganda without even a right of response. That's fantastic. I love it, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So let's play this clip where Ellen McNair references the fact that we have hired McKinsey to shape Alabama's economy.
Well, I saw the other day that y'all and the governor announced the development of a new strategy.
Right.
It wasn't in the announcement of a strategy. You're saying basically we're going to take months to develop one. Talk about that. What goes into that, and what is the goal?
Sure. So the one thing that Governor Ivey asked me to do as I joined this team is to develop a new strategic plan for economic development for the state. So the last plan was done in 2012.
Is that the Accelerate Alabama?
Accelerate Alabama, and then it was adjusted and modified a little bit in 2016. So the world has changed a good bit in those years. So it really is time to do another approach. So that's a big job in trying to really understand the complexities of where we are and really predicting the future. It's a big challenge. It's a big job to do. So what the governor announced last week is the hiring of the consultants, and that is the first step. So that core team that we discussed, really developed a strategy and a time frame. I had a deadline that I told Governor Ivey that I would give her our process by the end of March, which is what I did. We have hired McKenzie Company, world-class consultant, to do the quantitative piece. World-class consultant.
All right, there we go. McKinsey & Company, world-class consultants hired to shape Alabama's economy. So, before we're going to give some examples of why McKinsey is bad, why you should be concerned, but I think the first question that is going to be on most people's mind is Jake, what the hell are you talking about? What is McKinsey? What is management consult? What are you talking about? So, Gabby, can you tell us, what am I talking about? What's McKinsey?
Yeah, so McKinsey is a consulting firm, and what is consulting is a question that most people have because it is very, very opaque. And McKinsey specifically are management consultants, which is different from, say, more specialized consultants like engineering consultants or technical consultants. Management consultants means that they work with, CEOs and bosses, management of companies. So that is really clear who's side of things they're on, right? When we're talking about how things affect labor. And they go in sort of the way that they talk about themselves is that they solve problems, right? Oh, I'm a CEO. I'm not getting enough sales. I'm not making enough profit margin. Call in McKinsey. They're going to run the numbers. They're going to tell me what I should be doing with my business to make more money for management.
I see. So they are not concerned typically with making the job better, with getting workers more money, with making sure the job is safer, or making sure that consumers get a good product.
No, they're absolutely not concerned about those things. They may say that they're concerned about those things, but their actions show otherwise. In fact, the author of a book on them, the firm, Duff McDonald, called them the single greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs than anyone, anywhere, at any time in modern history. So that is really a big part of their MO, is mass layoffs.
And, just to kind of expand on that, I think in your video, and I would encourage folks to go and watch the video. There's going to be some things that we don't talk about that are in that video from More Perfect Union. Go to More Perfect Union on YouTube and find the video about McKinsey. It's great. But one of the stories that you highlighted in that video was about McKenzies Consulting with Disney. And some of the questions that they asked, particularly around safety, were just kind of baffling to me. Can you explain why Disney reached out to McKinsey and what some of the recommendations were that McKinsey gave to Disney?
Yeah, so they were hired by a Disney park in, I believe, the 90s. And from that park's conception in the 60s all the way up until the 90s and early 2000s, it was very, very safe. They had totally minimal accidents. And the reason for that was because they had maintenance staff who were checking things all the time. They had a large maintenance staff. They had people working around the clock, and they were going around just doing really routine stuff. They were checking, safety features on rides like the seat belts and the lap bars and stuff. And just making sure everything was smooth. Oh, a nut is loose. Let's tighten that. And McKinsey came in. They were hired by Disney, and Disney really wanted to increase corporate profit. They were looking for shareholder value in this, partnership with McKinsey. And they said, how can we make more money? And McKinsey always looks at how you can save more money, spend less money. And the quickest way to do that is to cut labor. So labor is always the first thing to go, or one of the first things to go. And they said, hey, why are you paying this huge maintenance staff when your rides are totally safe and they don't malfunction? What are we doing? And as you may have already guessed, that's kind of silly logic, because the reason that the rides weren't failing was because they were being checked. But they significantly reduced their maintenance staff. They moved a lot of people to the graveyard shift, meaning like overnight shifts. And that was really, really difficult for the staff that they retained. And then, of course, stuff starts falling apart. And then they had a number of accidents following those changes where, maintenance issues and staffing were cited in all of those accidents.
And that's just one example. You mentioned that they were the kind of greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs ever. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Before we move on to that, what were the ramifications of that? What happened? I don't want to miss that. What happened as they kind of scaled back their safety program?
Yeah, so there were, we talk about in our video, there were 3 deaths that happened. One was of a child, one was of the parents of a child, or one parent of a child, and another was of a young adult on a roller coaster.
And so that's kind of the stuff that happens when you hire people like this, and when you hire people that are
their training is to maximize profit as opposed to maximize, the goodness of the product or things like this. And, one of the manifestations of that is laying people off, trying to get fewer workers to do more work. And, this came out of there was as wages increased and as CEO pay increased, somebody, they started noticing, oh no, workers are making more money, or workers are increasing at a faster rate than CEOs. Their compensation was increasing at a faster rate than CEOs. And, there were people that thought that were a problem. But it seems like one of the things...
and those people were the CEOs.
Right. Those people were the CEOs. Yeah, it was not the workers. The workers did not really have a problem with that. And, as the CEOs saw a problem with that, one of the things that you point to about the relationship of these consulting firms is they really allow each party to kind of push blame off. Right? And so the CEOs, they bring in these consulting firms, and look, it's the consulting firms that are saying that we would be a more profitable company if we lay you all off. So, look, I'm just doing what the experts tell me is in the best interest of the company. And it just happens that the best interest of the company is for me to make twice as much money next year and for me to lay off half of you, right? And so talk to us about that relationship and how they kind of... The companies pawn off responsibility on these out of state special interest groups is something that we would say, kind of in political speak, but out of the company interest groups, and how then also the consulting firms pawn responsibility off on the companies. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest issues that I see with McKinsey is they have this relationship that's very mutually beneficial, right? Kind of a symbiotic relationship between the management of large corporations and McKinsey, where management can say, we want to make more money. And, the ways to do that, sometimes they're creative solutions. Sometimes it's just laying everybody off, right? Sometimes it's very simple. And they say, we want to do this thing. McKinsey says, okay, we'll come and help you. And then McKinsey gives them that legitimization. They say, here's a PowerPoint. We've run all the numbers. Here's our spreadsheets. Laying people off is going to be the best thing to do. And the company's going to say, okay, great. And then if anything goes wrong, if, people who lost their jobs are angry, or you have, safety or quality issues start to ensue, then you have the company can say, well, we were just following recommendations of the experts. And McKinsey can say, we don't run your company. We just make recommendations. We just make PowerPoints. And so nobody is ever really on the hook.
And what's interesting to me, and this might be controversial, is to my knowledge, like the state of Alabama isn't like actually a company like whose purpose is to like generate profit. So I'm curious like how these tactics apply to like a government. And to be clear, I think like McKinsey is bad for corporations too. Mm-hmm. But it also seems like it would be especially bad for like an entity that like isn't actually supposed to generate profit. So I don't know if you have any insight or like how you think it's going to apply to Alabama or a state.
Totally. That's a great question, because it is different when we're talking about companies that are looking to make profit and the government that is not looking necessarily to make profit, but they are looking to, do certain things, and they have, financial goals. And the major difference there is that they're going not to be looking for how to increase profit, but they are going to still be looking at how to cut costs. And when we look at, they do a lot of work with governments, just to sort of give some background. They work with many, state and city governments in the United States. They work with the federal government in the United States, and they work for many foreign governments as well. They've worked extensively in Australia, Canada, China, and Saudi Arabia, just to name a few. But that's definitely not all. France as well.
Right. And one of the things that they're able to do is I think kind of put a sugarcoat the bad policies that the companies want to implement. So Barbara in the chat said, Dr. Mad said, my school district didn't cut positions. We, quote, adopted a new staffing ratio. And I think some of that kind of executive speak is one of the things that they pay McKinsey millions of dollars for. And speaking of their, involvement with governments as well as corporations, we started off with highlighting the fact that McKinsey is under criminal investigation. And my understanding is that is due to their involvement in the opioid crisis, and particularly the fact that they were both advising the FDA and Purdue, right?
Yeah. So they were advising Purdue Pharma, the biggest producer of opioids, and the FDA at the same time. And this was not necessarily a fluke. This was sort of standard practice for them, where they would work for both a company making something that is regulated, say tobacco or opioids, and the government entity that regulates them at the same time. And they would say, we have separate teams doing everything. So there's totally firewalls in between all of these different projects. But it came out that not only were there not firewalls between these projects, they had some of the same individual people working on both of those projects. And when they went to the FDA, they'd be like, yeah, we'll work for you. And when they went to these companies of regulated substances, they'd say, we will work for you and we can help you because we work for the FDA. We know the ins and outs of the FDA. And that was a selling point for them in getting clients like Purdue, they worked for many, many years for Philip Morris Tobacco. They even worked for Juul, the producer of vapes. Yeah.
Right. And now, one thing about McKinsey is that, because they are so invested in kind of their philosophy is executing, ideas and priorities for companies and corporations and governments, they must be very cheap, right? Because, theoretically a government or a corporation could just hire, a business person and, 22-year-old business grad themselves and have them on staff. But instead, they're hiring a whole other corporation to do this consulting work. So McKinsey must be very cost effective for the kind of work that they do, right?
No, they are not. McKinsey is very, very expensive.
What? You're kidding.
McKinsey projects are generally in the millions of dollars. It depends a lot on the project and the scope of that. But, we're looking at projects from $2 million to $100 million for government work most of the time.
And I think one of the good illustrations of just how much they cost, and then also we can talk about how it was not cost effective. Even though they paid all of these millions of dollars, the policies that they executed at the encouragement of McKinsey were ultimately bad for the state. Was the state of Illinois? Can you talk to us about McKinsey's introduction to Illinois? I think there's some kind of interesting strategy there with, I don't know if you would call it a loss leader or whatever, but there was they did some work for Illinois and then they just kept doing work for Illinois and the costs kept increasing. So can you talk to us about that, their relationship with that state?
Yes. So when they began their relationship with the state of Illinois, they did do it for free. And they said, we'll help you. No problem. Don't worry about it. We're going to come in. We're going to help you restructure Medicaid. And they did that. They got their foot in the door. This was in the 1990s. But this was sort of a resume builder for them. And from there, they started getting more and more expensive contracts. And they have stayed. They still work for the state of Illinois. And this is sort of illustrative of something that happens where they come in, it might be free, they say, we'll help you, no problem, and then they stay for a very long time.
And so what are some of the other things that they've been doing for the state of Illinois since I guess first, what were the results of that, their work on restructuring Medicaid? Was this really beneficial for the citizens of Illinois? And then what is some of the other work that they've done since then?
Yeah, so the biggest sector of their clients, the clients that make them the most money, is in private health insurance and healthcare conglomerates. They work for Anthem, Aetna, United, lots of companies like that, and many more that we don't even know. And so that shows kind of where their interests lie, right? They're here to help states do Medicaid, but they work for all of the private insurers. So people are, losing Medicaid. But I also want to point out that they don't necessarily, that's not totally one-sided. They work for any client who hires them, right? They don't have a political agenda beyond, their own profit and the profit of their clients. And they also worked for Obamacare, which we'll probably talk about later as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. But they spent a lot of, or Illinois ended up spending. Sorry, I'm looking at my numbers. So a contract was canceled in Illinois later when people started to clock some things that were strange. There was a $63 billion procurement to 7 managed care companies, 4 of which were McKinsey clients. And this money being spent had bypassed the usual oversight that government spending received. An official on the subject said that this proposal was not afforded the same independent oversight as, quote, say, a contract to purchase paper clips.
Wow. Well, that's and so I think that should really kind of illustrate some of the concerns that we should have with the idea that McKinsey is going to be in the driver's seat of really restructuring or structuring Alabama's economy in the future. The idea that they could be moving bids around to their clients on bids to the order of tens of billions of dollars. I mean, this is very, very concerning stuff. Talking about some of their other work with the government, with governments, you alluded to Obamacare. So what was their involvement with Obamacare?
So I actually don't know the full scope of what their involvement was with Obamacare, but famously when Obamacare unveiled its website, the website crashed. And then it took a very long time to fix. And McKinsey had been involved in the, website building part of this, which was building, large systems to deal with the data of lots and lots of American citizens, right? We're talking about huge volumes of information. And McKinsey knew that this website was not up to par and probably wasn't going to work. And the government unveiled it anyway, and then it crashed. And that caused a lot of issues with people's enrollment and people's insurance. And they were really involved in that. And the thing that is sort of interesting is that this is another part of their work, is that they always lean on using outside contractors. They're an outside contractor, and when they structure these kinds of programs for governments, that is their first go-to. They also worked in setting up NASA in the 50s, like the organization of NASA, how that organization functions. And they also created this system where they rely on a lot of out-of-house contractors. And what that does is it means that then when something goes wrong with those out-of-house contractors, or it becomes expensive, the actual government entity we're looking at doesn't have the capability to do the thing that they need to do. The government entities setting up Obamacare didn't have the capacity to build a good website. They had to go to outside people, and that can cause a lot of problems.
And just to underscore the kind of amorality of McKinsey, I wanted to just really quickly highlight some of the things that we talked about yesterday or the day before, whenever we spoke. You mentioned that they have also done work for ICE, and they made recommendations about the cost, about increasing the cost effectiveness of the administration of ICE and child separation and migrants and things like this, that were so cutthroat that ICE agents refused to carry them out, right? So, I mean, from wherever you're coming from, right, whether if you're like a lefty and you care about migrants, you're like, oh, wow, that's really bad, and then even if you're like a right-winger and you love ICE and you love law enforcement, right, I mean, they are more extreme than these people. Like, that's really bonkers. You also highlighted they work for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, their whole thing is they say we don't do policy, we just do execution. One of the people we spoke to worked on that project, and he was very young, and he was like, "What? I don't understand. How we're saying we don't do policy, we just do execution." For this thing that's causing a lot of human harm. And so much so that the people who work there every day said, oh, we can't do those things. Right. We can't separate families even more than we are just to, increase bed space in these facilities, things like that.
Right. And then, doing work for Saudi Arabia, dictatorial regime, doing work for Philip Morris tobacco companies, responsible for the deaths of a bunch of, freaking lot of people.
Lots of people. They only pulled out of the tobacco industry in, I believe, 2022, very recently.
Wow.
Mind you, we've known that smoking causes cancer since about the 1960s.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is just a very shifty company, and I guess I'm kind of winding down as far as questions that I have. But I wanted to make sure that I give you a chance if there's anything else that you want to talk about McKinsey in particular, and then wrapping up with just a kind of caution that McKinsey is not the only bad consulting company, right? They're all of these management consulting companies are terrible. We just have more insight into McKinsey because they have had some whistleblowers and people who used to work for them write books about their experience and things like this. So we have more insight into McKinsey, and so that's why when we talk about the evils of management consulting, it's a lot of examples from McKinsey, but listeners should not take this segment as get rid of McKinsey, hire some other freaks, right? So I'll let you. I'll let you have the floor there.
Yeah, we picked McKinsey for this project for a variety of reasons, but all of the management consulting companies do very similar things. So keep eyes out if you happen to be looking. If you're skimming through the details and you see things like Accenture, Deloitte, BCG, Bain, there's others, but those are big
actually
ones that
created, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Deloitte actually created the first strategic economic plan, Accelerate Alabama, in 2013. I was reading a little bit from that report, and I saw that name. So yes, upgraded, I guess.
Interesting, yeah. That is actually really interesting in terms of the difference between these two plans, if you're going to get into that. What is the difference?
Do you know?
I don't know in particular, in part because the information that's been released about the new plan is very, very vague, which is another point that I wanted to bring up. That is, consultants rely on this vague language that I think can make a lot of people feel like they don't understand it because they didn't go to business school, and these are big business words. But a lot of these words are kind of gibberish. You're going to see a lot of words like optimization and right sizing, and what was the one you said before? Ratios.
Adopting new staffing ratios, synergies, things like this. Yeah,
yeah, you're going to see a lot of things like that, and they frankly don't mean as much as they seem like they do. And that is on purpose. But something I was going to say was, I don't know a lot of the specifics on their contract with Alabama. I don't think a lot of that information is public at this point. But I just wanted to give an example of a government that canceled a contract with McKinsey. And this happened in Austin, Texas. There was a $2 million contract to study a homelessness program. They were going to give $2 million to McKinsey to run data analysis on this stuff. And they ended up canceling it because it was going to study housing units that had not yet been built. And somehow nobody had caught that. And then there were some parties from homelessness nonprofits in the area and the county who said, wait, why are we going to spend $2 million to study something that hasn't been built yet, and with a company that has all of these ethical concerns that's under criminal investigation? And they ended up canceling that contract. So I just wanted to say that because I don't know the details of the Alabama contract specifically, but that is a thing that can happen if the interested parties decide it is not in their interest.
That was great to know. And also it seems like you could just spend $2 million on housing if they are that concerned about homelessness. It's interesting in that clip from Capital Journal, I saw that, and they were trotting out like all the anti-union lines, especially like it's outside agitators coming in. But like McKinsey quite literally is an outside agitator that then brings in new outside agitators until you're like 3 steps removed from the people that are like actually impacted by these plans.
Well, and they're the outside folks that supposedly the conservative movement hates now, right? I mean, these are like Harvard, Yale freaks. You know what I mean? Like, I thought we hated the elites, and now we're bringing in the elites to structure our economy. It's bonkers. Gabby Spielberg, again, freelance journalist, former fellow for More Perfect Union, did this video for More Perfect Union about McKinsey. Really appreciate your time. Anything else before we let you go?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's important to just keep asking questions about these contracts and demanding that those questions be answered by your government. The questions that I personally have are, what are the major differences between the old plan, Accelerate Alabama, and the new plan? And really what was wrong with the old plan before? Why are we making this change? And I haven't found answers to those questions. I wonder if you or your listeners will find answers to those questions soon.
That's a great point.
Thank you. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Gabby Spielberg, freelance journalist, More Perfect Union. Check out her video, and we will. I'll keep in touch with you as this story unfolds, and we may bring you back for some analysis as more comes out about the plan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back to break down some of the stuff about the minimum wage and the libs killing jobs, the job killing libs. We're going to break that down on the other side. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio program. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with Whitney Washington. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and appreciate everybody for your participation in the chat. Had some good conversation about McKenzie. And there was a suggestion from Lenny, actually, that I thought was very good, that unions should add in their collective bargaining agreements or other contracts clauses that bar these firms from impacting working conditions. I think that would be something interesting that folks should consider as they are negotiating their next contract. So one of the big stories in the last week has been that. The libs in California have put 10 100,000 fast food workers out of a job due to their new crazy, unrealistic $20 an hour minimum wage that went into effect in April. That's what some folks are saying, but is it true? We're going to evaluate that claim and give a little bit of background as well. So the claim itself originated from the Wall Street Journal, and specifically they said that jobs were down 1.3% between September and January, specifically in the limited service sector of the restaurant industry. Now, immediately, as I'm looking into this, and you may have noticed this as well, you might have a question. You might say, Jake, you just said the law went into effect in April, but you're saying that the claim is that the jobs were lost from September to January, which January is months before the hike is set to take place. And, that's a good question, actually. That's a good question, and the people putting this stuff out are not giving an answer to it. The Wall Street Journal, the Hoover Institution, the New York Post, and the California Council of Bosses have all been primary instigators in throwing this claim around, and none of them explain exactly why it is that the minimum wage, which went into effect in April, caused 10,000 job losses between September of the year prior and January. But just to give the benefit of the doubt, I suppose you could say, if they were asked, that perhaps the restaurants are preparing to right size before the law takes effect. They're getting their house in order because they're seeing this coming down the pike. They know that they're not going to be able to, to afford this, and so they're making these preparations ahead of the expected change. Okay, so we're just going to stipulate that, and we're going to put a pin in it. What I want to help folks understand is seasonality. Seasonality is a very important thing in a lot of industries. Some businesses are going to have more staff during some parts of the year than others because they have more business in some parts of the year than others. A prime example of this is going to be lawn mowing, right? A lawn cutting business, a lawn care business is going to have significantly more work in the spring than in the fall. So it would make sense that a lot of these businesses, now there may be some who have arrangements that kind of like teachers do where they pay for, the season's work over 12 months. I'm sure that there are some places like that, but there are probably also a lot of places that hire in the spring and fire in the fall, right? And so when those folks are fired in the fall, it doesn't say anything in and of itself about any laws or policies or anything that may or may not have changed that fall or in the months preceding or succeeding it, right? What you want to do to check and see if, when seasonally adjusted, the numbers are meaningfully different, right? That's what you want to do if you want to try to analyze impact. So if the lawn care industry, for example, were to shed $20,000 a year every single fall, like clockwork, then if they were to shed, let's say, 15,000 jobs in 1 year, that is not indicative of a negative trend, right? In fact, actually shedding 15,000 jobs as opposed to 20,000 jobs might be indicative of a positive trend, right? That's how you want to analyze industries that have seasonality. And I'm sure, if you're smart, you might know where I'm going with this, so we're just going to go out and say it. These numbers that are being thrown around by the California bosses, by the Wall Street Journal, by the Hoover Institution, all these fancy pants, Harvard-educated business people, were not seasonally adjusted, actually. In fact, every single year, the job numbers peak in the fall, and they decline through January before beginning to bounce back again, right? And if you're going to, look, if folks that are really listening, you're going to notice that, they peak in the fall and then they decline through January. Jake, that's exactly the period that you just told me was highlighted by the Wall Street Journal. And that's right. You get an award because that's exactly what happened.
That is exactly what happened. The Wall Street Journal took numbers from every single year this happens, there are thousands of jobs that are shed in the restaurant industry in California from August and September to January. This happens like clockwork religiously in the service sector in California. And so the Wall Street Journal highlighted this annual trend and tried to say that this was due to the change in the minimum wage. But actually, if you look at the numbers season to season, which is what you should be doing, you should not be comparing the numbers in August of 2023 to the numbers in November of 2023, right? That doesn't make sense. You should be comparing August of 2023 to August of 2022 and September of 2023 to September of 2022 and so on and so forth. You should be comparing like months in different years. And actually, if you look at the period highlighted by the Wall Street Journal, in every single month of the period highlighted, limited service sector employment, which was the employment that they were highlighting, was up every single month that they highlighted. September 2023, more limited service sector workers than September 2022. The same for August. The same for October, November, December, January, February, March, and April, the latest month for which we have data. And it's worth noting, when the minimum wage actually took effect, there were more fast food jobs in California than the year before. Every single month, right? That's notable. That's notable, and actually says that the exact opposite is happening of what the Wall Street Journal is saying is happening. So look, the latest month that we have data on is April. Could things change? Hypothetically, could things change in May? Maybe. It's possible. Anything is possible. Could things change when the June data comes out? Maybe, I don't know, right? I can't see the future. I'm not a psychic, right? We're going to have to see what happens. But currently, there is not cause for concern. There is, in fact, no negative trends in the limited service sector in California. I just want to highlight another aspect of this story that was pointed out by Michael Hiltzik in the Los Angeles Times. These numbers have been trotted around by the restaurant bosses and their allied associations, including in a full-page ad that they purchased in USA Today across California, highlighting individual stories, right? So they have this big headline, 10,000 jobs lost. In memoriam was the ad. In memoriam for the 10,000 jobs lost. And so then under that statistic, they have all of these individual stories. One of those stories was Rubio's Bar and Grill. And digging into this story is going to help illustrate why, absent good statistics to back up these stories, you should be very suspicious of these sob stories when they come out. And when you hear, such and such restaurant fired 10,000 or 1,000 people, or they had to lay off 100 workers, or blah, 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 right? You should be very suspicious every time you hear an individual story about what, you should be suspicious of the broader conclusions that you should draw from this individual story, especially when they come from, politically motivated corporations. So here's from the Los Angeles Times. Rubio's Coastal Grill on June the 3rd, the Carlsbad chain confirmed that it had closed 48, almost 50 of its California restaurants, which is about 1/3 of its 134 locations. That's a lot, right? I mean, that's wow. As my colleague, this is the Los Angeles Times talking, as my colleague Don Lee reported, Rubio's attributed the closings to the rising cost of doing business in California. Another way to interpret that is the soon-to-come minimum wage increase, right? So, wow, there's, what else is there to say, Jake? They said it right there. And why shouldn't we trust the bosses? The bosses said this is why they're getting rid of all the jobs, so that must be why they're getting rid of all the jobs. But the LA Times points out that there is more to the story. The biggest expense that Rubio's has been facing is debt, a burden that has grown since the chain was acquired in 2010, 14 years ago, by private equity firm Mill Road Capital.
By 2020, the chain owed $72.3 million, and it filed for bankruptcy. Indeed, its full declaration with the bankruptcy court filed on June 5th. In that declaration, the company acknowledged that along with increases in the minimum wage, it was facing a, quote, unsustainable debt burden. So, difficulties with increases in the minimum wage, but an unsustainable debt burden. And yet, it is not the unsustainable debt burden that you hear trumpeted around by the conservative, media and anti-worker type folks. It's the, allusion to the minimum wage increases. The LA Times continues, the company emerged from bankruptcy at the end of 2020 with settlements that included a reduction in its debt load. Then came the pandemic, a significant headwind. Among its struggles, again, was debt, $72.9 million owed to its largest creditor, TREW Capital Management, a firm that specializes in lending to distressed restaurant businesses. It filed for bankruptcy again on June 5th, 2 days after it announced its store closings. The case is pending. It's worth noting that high debt is often a feature of private equity takeovers. That's actually a big part of what happened in the Red Lobster case, why Red Lobster is going under. In such cases, saddling an acquired company with debt gives the acquirers a means to extract cash from their companies, even if it complicates the company's path to profitability. Whether that's a factor in Rubio's recent difficulties is not clear. So, there you go. There's some analysis of the statistics, little digging in a little bit deeper into one of the individual stories. But back to the statistics, just to further combat some of the common misunderstandings about the minimum wage, it's worth looking at the record in California as it relates to jobs and the minimum wage, because California has actually been steadily increasing their minimum wage from about $9 an hour in 2015 to now $16 an hour across the state, plus the new $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food work and some even higher minimum wages in cities. Has the increase in the minimum wage cut jobs at all? At all, even once, since it began increasing? The answer to that, as you might expect from my incredulous tone, is no, actually. In fact, every single year, except for 2020, and except for 2020 because, the pandemic, right? Everything. There was a lot of job cuts in 2020. Not illustrative of anything to do with the minimum wage. So, in every single year since they began increasing the minimum wage in 2015, fast food jobs rose. Since the minimum wage began rising in 2015, they have added about 150,000 new fast food jobs total in California, an increase of employment in the sector of about 25%. 1 in 4 fast food jobs in California that exist today did not exist in 2015 when they began raising the minimum wage. So why is this happening? Isn't it simple economics 101 that if workers make more, then there's going to be less jobs? Actually, not really. Studies have not borne that out, that increasing minimum wages, is going to actually have negative impacts on. There has actually not been really any studies showing any sort of significant or statistically meaningful decrease in jobs from higher minimum wages. Actually, and some of the reasons for this is that higher pay means lower turnover. It means helping address labor shortages, filling filling positions, and then that when you fill positions, you're going to be able to more efficiently do the job. Higher productivity. It's going to boost morale, et cetera, et cetera. The next question is about automation, and the technology is just still not cost effective, even according to CEOs. There was a McDonald's CEO of a franchise in California was asked about automation, and they said it's just not there. It's going to be another several years before it's even possibly cost effective. So, and to the extent that restaurants have automated or modernized, we have some of these. We have like a order
order panels sometimes in restaurants now, and that's including in Alabama, might I say. There are restaurants that I go into today that people do not take your order. You put in your own order in Alabama, where the minimum wage is $7.25. So it's really not, it is not really indicative of increasing automation when your minimum wage is higher. But nevertheless, where that has happened, it has done less job cutting, at least in the fast food industry, and more of a reallocation of resources. So if a task takes 50% less time, what we've seen in the restaurant industry is, and this is not to say that this is always going to happen, it's just to say what has happened, is less that they cut 50% of the jobs associated with that task, and rather that they employ the employee, they have the employee doing something else with that time, right? So if it takes me 50% less time, then instead of, firing me or whatever, they've just got me doing something else to try to increase, the customer experience and blah, 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 right? There's always something that you can be doing in a restaurant. I know because I worked in a restaurant for several years, and there's always something that somebody can be doing. And so that's actually what we've seen. We've seen automation not really killing jobs, just reallocating human resources. So there we go. That's kind of what's been happening with the minimum wage. People have been, either lying about the job cuts, or they don't understand, or they haven't done much reading about it. But yeah, now you know. It's not true. Actually, the minimum wage has led to 10,000 job losses in the state of California. Actually, jobs have continued to increase in the fast food sector in California ever since 2015. So there you go. We're going to have one more segment here, and we're going to push Boss Watch to the second half of the program, just because I want to make sure to get to this Alabama story before we go. And that is about Mercedes. This is another story that I mentioned in Last Week in Southern Labor, but I wanted to, again, kind of expand on it a little bit because it's very important. And once we get into the second half of the program, we're going to take calls, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Go ahead and call in if you want to, talk to us, ask a question, put in your 2 cents about any of these stories that we've been talking about. 844-899-8857. We'll take your calls at 11. So Mercedes, as we know, was able to beat back a union in their Vance, Alabama plant, in part by making a lot of promises to their employees. And it has not taken long at all for the company to start to falter on those promises. And actually, look, I have to say I'm kind of surprised that they're already walking back some of this stuff, because I just assumed that, I don't know, I actually thought that they were going to try to do a lot of this, or at least some of this stuff, so that they have plausible deniability about not doing some of the more extreme things. I thought they were going to, continue to try to improve, because they had been making improvements at the Mercedes plant in Vance. They did a raise. They eliminated 2-tier employment. So I just assumed probably this is a trend that's going to continue, and the case is going to be for the UAW that they're going to have to make is that you could still get more if you unionized. But actually that doesn't seem to be what's happening, because in particular, Chance, and because they have already started saying, we're not really going to do that. Actually, that's not what we're going to do. And in particular, Chance Phillips in the Alabama Political Reporter, he notes that employees tell him one of the primary concerns was holiday pay and time off for Independence Day. Before the election, workers were apparently told by management that they would also be able to take off July 5th and 6th, either by using vacation days or by taking no pay. But many workers reportedly believed that the new CEO, Federico Koklowski, I don't know, would make July 5th and 6th paid days off after the election concluded, right? So that's and July 5th and 6th, they do like a shutdown or something every year, or at least this year they've been anticipating a shutdown to kind of, to do something in the plant. Plants do this regularly. They have shutdowns and then they shut down the plant for a few days and then they come back. So many workers reportedly believed that the new CEO would make July 5th and 6th paid days off after the election concluded. But this change has failed to happen.
But the company is attributing that change to the UAW, saying... So that's what they're saying right now, and they're saying that because Mercedes is saying that we're in status quo because the UAW has filed challenges against the election. The UAW, as you know, is alleging that Mercedes has violated the law with respect to, labor relations and the National Labor Relations Act and having free and fair elections. The UAW is saying, you violated the law. We need to do another election because this was not free nor fair, so we need to do another one. And so management at Mercedes is saying because of these complaints, we are in status quo and we can't change anything, actually, despite the fact that they made multiple changes to employment over the course of the election, as has been previously reported on this and many other platforms. So Fain is combating this lie by Mercedes, saying that management is telling workers that they are unable to follow through on promised increases to wages, benefits, and working conditions because the UAW filed objections to the last month's election. He specifically stated that Rolf Rona, an MBUSI vice president of human resources, quote, told several group leaders that MBUSI could not pay workers for an upcoming plant shutdown because they were still in, quote, status quo. Shawn Fain dispels this myth about status quo in a letter that he wrote to the German unions to make sure that they knew that Mercedes is the one that is, that is doing this. It's not because of the law. Trying to set the record straight, telling the German unions to try to get the Mercedes to try to not rely on this as an excuse. Fain explains in the letter, status quo refers to a specific legal standard in U.S. labor law that requires unionized employers to notify the union prior to making any changes to wages, benefits, or working conditions and bargain with the union over any proposed changes to implementation. However, MBUSI is currently not unionized, so no status quo condition exists. So that's the issue that Mercedes workers are facing now. Mercedes is lying about what they can and can't do under labor law. Shawn Fain is trying to set the record straight. In a note to Mercedes workers from the UAW, to Mercedes workers directly from the UAW, they say, we thought Mercedes would wait a little longer before breaking their promise to make things better. I did too, honestly. This is surprising to me. We're only a couple weeks out. Back to the UAW message. But they're already refusing to raise our pay and make their improvements. And they're trying to blame it on our union. Here's the real deal. Our charges against Mercedes do not stop the company from raising our pay. There is no law that blocks them from making improvements while we're fighting for a free and fair election. There is no law that stops them from paying us for the July shutdown rather than force us to take vacation or go without pay. MBUSI told some workers that the company couldn't pay us during the shutdown because they're in, quote, status quo. But status quo is a legal standard that only protects unionized workers by requiring management to give them notice and opportunity to bargain. But before any changes go into effect, we voted against unionizing, so status quo does not exist at MBUSI, and management is free to do whatever they want with or without our input. For the next year, we're riding with RICO. That's one of the things that the pro-management side, one of their slogans during the election, because Federico is the new CEO. So they're riding with RICO instead of the UAW. So for the next year, the UAW says we're riding with RICO, and without a union, we're just along for the ride. He steers the car and hits the brakes whenever he feels like it. Fortunately, union workers in Mercedes around the world are standing with us. UAW President Shawn Fain just let them know that the company has gone back on its word, and they need to make things right. They also linked to Shawn Fain's letter to the German workers. So that's where things stand with Mercedes in Alabama. Very frustrating, I'm sure, for the Mercedes workers, particularly if you voted against unionization on the belief that the boss was going to be really nice to you. Hopefully, if nothing else, this is educational for the ultimate next election, because one way or another, I'm sure that there's going to be another union election at Mercedes, and hopefully folks remember this, because this is kind of what happens when you trust the boss and you don't allow yourself any mechanism with which to hold them to account. And that's what happens when you don't have a union. You have no say. So there you go. That's going to wrap it up for us on the first half of the program. Like I said, we have a whole second half of the program. So if you want to call in, 844-899-8857. That's 844-899-TVLR. We'll take calls at the top of the program. We're also going to be talking to Jonathan Melrod, a former UAW organizer in the 70s, about his time organizing at American Motors. We're also going to be talking about how vouchers have blown a hole in Arizona's budget. We're going to be talking about Iowa child labor law violators, and some more. So find us on YouTube and Facebook to continue watching the program. And yeah, so don't miss the second half of the program. Facebook, YouTube. The Valley Labor Report is where you're going to be able to find us. Appreciate everybody tuning in. TVLR.fm is where you can find us at our website. We're also, anywhere else, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to any part of the program that you may have missed. And really looking forward to talking to you next week. Follow us online. And if you don't, then we'll see you next week. All right, folks, we are off the radio. Appreciate you staying tuned. Like I said, we got a great second half of the program lined up for you. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We have with us Whitney Washington from Alabama Arise, also member of the CWA, Local 3908. Thanks for hanging out with us, Whitney. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's what else am I going to be doing on a Saturday morning?
Here you go. Nothing else better to do on a Saturday morning than spend it with some loser. We have a caller on the line, actually. Let's go ahead and get them on the air. The caller is from an 818 area code. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Jacob. Hey, Whitney. This is Lenny Powers from Southern California.
Lenny from Southern California. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Just wanted to just comment on that. On the UAW workers, or not, well, they're not UAW workers, but the Mercedes workers that had those empty promises not being fulfilled by management.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. This is definitely a learning lesson for those folks.
Mm-hmm.
And they need. The understanding. Especially from the perspective of a union member myself. That is, quite involved with the process of, within the process of, my union, understanding contracts, understanding the mechanisms and the protections that the contract provides. That you're better off trying to go and purchase the PS5 off the TEMU and expect it to be fulfilled in good faith. If you're trusting a CEO to keep his promise without the protection of a contract, and Sean Fain is not obligated, to go to bat, take any further action on behalf of these workers, because again, they're not unionized, and that's but him doing it out of good faith, should be seen as a further effort of getting these folks to realize that your bosses aren't looking out for your best interests, and more than often than not, without the the enforcement and the law behind a union contract. They don't have to. Right. It's the dynamics of the power between being represented and having the protections of a union that allow you to make to fulfill such demands. Because anybody can make a promise, anybody can make a handshake deal, but without the proper mechanisms in place and the laws in place to put behind those agreements, then they're not going to be fulfilled. And this is just a lesson for anybody out there that that takes management's word for it. They should see that and understand that when the campaign rolls around again, remember this and vote accordingly. So just want to leave you with that. Thank you for taking my call, and you have a good one.
Yep. Thanks, Lenny. Appreciate it. And you're exactly right. And, hopefully it will be a learning experience, and hopefully it'll be a learning experience that is not too terribly painful. Hopefully they'll be able to vote again within a year or so, and they'll be able to win and make the right decision going forward. This is what happened at Volkswagen. Volkswagen had 2 other elections before their ultimate final successful election. And some of the Volkswagen workers that were down. I was down at the vote count in Tuscaloosa, and there were some Volkswagen workers there. They had come down to celebrate, and ultimately they did not have as good a time as they had hoped. But they did say that this is what we had to do. We had to go through it multiple times, and one of the reasons that we were able to win is that there was all this momentum. The UAW has changed. They have, started winning. They are less corrupt. And so there was all of that. But also they had had multiple elections already where they had seen this kind of stuff, right? Where they had seen the boss promise changes and they had seen the boss not follow through. So they knew that, the only way to actually ensure that anything changes, and it's not a guarantee that anything changes, but, it's something that it's a way that you at least have a say in what happens next, is actually to unionize and to get a union contract. Because if you don't have that, then everything that happens in your company and in the corporation is at the whim of the employer. They can change the working conditions. They can change the entire job description. They can change anything that they want about your job and about your pay and about whether or not you work there for any reason or no reason at all. And they don't have to answer to you for it. If you're unionized, they do. And you have a say. So that's something that the bosses don't want. So they're willing to lie to stop it, as we saw at Volkswagen and as we are seeing now in Mercedes. But, and so, hopefully it is educational for these folks. It's a good... it's something that that everybody needs to learn, and hopefully folks that have not gone through this process, hopefully the media will explain to people what is happening and explain to people that the bosses are being caught lying, and so that fewer workers fall for this sort of thing in the future. I think that Jon Melrod may be a little bit later than we were anticipating, so we'll do another. We'll go ahead and get to Boss Watch. We pushed it out of the first half of the program because I wanted to make sure that we got to the Mercedes bit in the first half. So Boss Watch is a segment. It's kind of the mirror image to Last Week in Southern Labor, where we like to take a look at what bosses were up to in the Southern United States and the American colonies, because these are also things that don't really get as much news as you would hope, and especially considering bosses are found responsible for the deaths of working people all the time. Hundreds of workers die on the job every single day, and a majority of them are preventable. And so we need to learn from them and learn from what's been going on, and we need to protect ourselves because the bosses aren't going to do it. Starting in Alabama, right here in our state, a Boaz mobile I almost said mobile because I was talking about Alabama. A Boaz mobile home manufacturer could have prevented a 62-year-old roofing laborer's fatal fall had the employer followed required fall protection standards, a U.S. Department of Labor investigation found. The department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration determined that a Cobco Builders employee was alone loading shingles as they straddled a 2-foot wide space between a platform and a mobile home's roof when they slipped and fell approximately 10 feet. OSHA cited Cobco Builders with 10 serious violations for hazards, including not providing fall protection, failure to train workers performing roof work at heights of 4 feet or more, not providing training to workers who operate forklifts, and not requiring workers applying adhesives to wear personal protective equipment, nor training them on the hazards related to the chemicals in use. The agency proposed $81,000 in penalties. As falls from heights continue to be the leading cause of fatalities and serious injuries in all industries, employers like Cobco Builders must know and understand the importance of fall protection standards and related training, said OSHA Area Office Director Joel Batiste in Birmingham, Alabama. Following these well-established safety requirements can mean the difference between an employer seeing its worker ending a shift safely or having to watch as a worker's family, friends, and co-workers grieve a needless tragedy. In right next door in Georgia, a U.S. Department of Labor workplace safety investigation found that a Woodbury plastic and resin manufacturer could have prevented a 37-year-old employee from suffering fatal injuries by following required safety rules designed to keep machines from starting up during maintenance. Investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned the maintenance technician at Crown USA was crushed inside an unlocked hooding palletizer while servicing the machine. OSHA determined the company violated federal regulations by failing to use adequate machine guarding to protect employees from struck-by and crushed-by hazards, failing to train employees on energy control procedures and maintain training records, failing to conduct inspections of energy control procedures, exposing workers to serious respiratory hazards, and by not protecting them from accumulations of airborne particles of powdered pigment and other types of dust throughout the facility, not providing personal protective equipment that prevents eye and skin irritation, and failing to label containers properly according to hazardous communication standards. Crown USA received 8 serious and 6 other than serious violations. The company faces about $100,000 in proposed OSHA penalties. In Texas, the U.S. Department of Labor has ordered American Home Protect in Plano and its parent company, Porch Group, Inc. in Seattle, to reinstate and pay back wages and compensatory damages to an employee who was fired in June 2023 after informing upper management about deceptive business practices. A whistleblower investigation by the Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration found the employee alerted American Home Protect and Porch Group management that customer refunds after canceling services were not issued in a timely manner to hundreds of customers because the companies required them to complete unnecessary steps in the cancellation process. The employee suffered retaliation for reporting what they reasonably believed to be a violation of the law. In addition to ordering the employee's reinstatement, OSHA has instructed the employer to pay about $110,000 in back wages and $76,000 in compensatory damages to the employee. The agency determined the companies violated provisions of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the Consumer Financial Protection Act that forbid employer retaliation against a worker who raises concerns about inappropriate financial activities. We had a few in that we wanted to mention, even though we won't have the time to dig deeply into them in dishonorable mentions. A federal workplace safety investigation into PetMate in Arlington, Texas, identified 1 willful violation and 8 serious violations of required safety regulations during its inspection into how an employee suffered serious, severe facial burns in December 2023, and the company now faces about $300,000 in proposed penalties. Iron Hill Brewery, a chain across several states, has agreed to pay $115,000 and furnish other relief to settle an EEOC race discrimination and retaliation lawsuit for conduct from one of its Georgia locations. The EEOC alleged that Iron Hill Brewery retaliated against and ultimately fired a black employee because of his race and because of his complaints about the treatment of other minority employees. 8 home renovation companies in St. Louis, Missouri, have agreed to pay over $65,000 collectively in penalties to the EPA to resolve alleged violations of the Federal Toxic Substances Control Act. So there we go. That's what bosses have been up to in the South. Not good, as always. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857 if you want to call into the program. You want to give your thoughts on anything that we've been talking about, or ask us a question. The line is open. Ben, do we have Jon Melrod in the Zoom? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Here's a story out of Arizona, not quite the South, but pretty close, and it has a lot of, unfortunately, probably relevant stuff to the state of Alabama. Just a reminder, the state of Alabama passed a school choice act to privatize public schools, divert $100 million away from public schools in Alabama to private schools in Alabama for the benefit of families who are primarily already sending their children to private schools, for the benefit of families who primarily, the vast majority of them, make vastly above the median wage in Alabama. A huge transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. That's what school choice, quote unquote, is. And, you know, this movement has been going on. This movement to privatize public schools has been going across the country and has been in place for some time. At one point, it had a lot of liberal backers. I think there's been less of that, but still has, some concerning support among some Democratic politicians. But Arizona has been at the leading edge of the school voucher movement, and vouchers are now to blame for approximately 50% of Arizona's state budget hole. They are now trying to fill holes in their state budget with opioid settlement money. They had money. So what's happened is recently Arizona has a budget crisis, right? They have a hole, and 50% of that hole is coming from the diversion of public funds from public schools to private schools. 50% of that is coming from their school voucher program, and now they are trying to borrow money from the opioid settlement funds to cover this hole, just to generally cover this budget hole, not to, implement any addiction services or anything related to helping people who have been harmed by opioid companies, who have been harmed by opioid addictions. No, we're just going to fill this budget hole that's been caused by right-wing and theocratic freaks who are stealing money from our public treasury to fund their rich religious friends' educations. It's absolutely, just criminal what's going on here. Josh Cowan, who has a guest on the program a while back, talking about school choice and vouchers and privatization and stuff like that. He's the one that pointed this out to me, and appreciate him for that. Folks should follow him on Twitter at Josh Cowan, MSU, Cowan spelled Cowen, MSU. And it's just really unfortunate because this doesn't have to happen. It's really, and Alabama seems to be heading in that direction.
Yeah, it's like I cannot wait to see how bad Alabama's is going to get. We passed the Choose Act this year, which, basically gives families putting their kids in private schools a $7,000, I think, sort of like tax rebate. So we will be following in their steps, probably pretty soon.
Yeah. And $100 million is the minimum, right? That's
a very conservative estimate, yeah.
Yes, because it's currently limited. The voucher program in the first year of implementation is limited to people in poverty, and I'm not sure exactly how they define that, but it's limited by income in this first year, and they're going to expand it in the second year. And the plan is for it to be a universal program by year 5, meaning that anybody and everybody, if you are Alabama's only billionaire, the guy who owns Yellowwood, that guy, he is going to be able to get public money to send his kid to private school if he wants, and he's a billionaire. It's really amazing that is their goal. That their goal is this universal program for school choice, because they hate, these same people, the conservative and right-wing and anti-government folks, they hate universal programs in any other context. When we're talking about Social Security, there's always plans. That's always one of their things, is they want to try to means test Social Security. They want to try to means test Social Security and try to chip away at who has access to it. They want to try to take it away from younger people as younger people age into Social Security. They want to cut the program. They want to give 20% across the board cuts. They want to do all this sorts of stuff and, to make programs not universal. And yet, when it comes to pilfering the public coffers, the public education coffers to fund, right-wing school projects, they're totally fine with it, and they want it to be universal, and everybody and their mother should be able to dip into the public funds to do this. It's absolutely ludicrous and totally betrays, kind of the lack of principles. And actually, there is a principle there, and the principle is destruction of government and destruction of public good and individualism as an ideology, an anti-public, anti-collective kind of ethos, right?
Well, and I imagine anti-intellectualism too, of let's keep the masses uneducated.
Right, yeah. We got to give all this money to Bubba's Bible School instead of, instead of Lee High School, because, Bubba's Bible School isn't going to be teaching them anything crazy about, the civil rights movement or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. But yeah, we do live in a society, and we should be funding our state accordingly. But that's not what they want, and that's their principle. Okay, thank you. Another story, not out of the South, but relevant as Hyundai has been taken to court again for the Department of Labor is now, I think the story is the Department of Labor is suing Hyundai as a joint employer, right? So Hyundai, it's been known for years now from a Reuters investigation that they have had wholly owned subsidiaries, right? And so it makes it difficult because Hyundai's been out there saying like, oh no, it's not us that's doing this. It's our subcontractors, and we had no idea. Even though the Smart LLC in particular is the one that's been kind of at the center of all this. They were a wholly owned subsidiary, completely owned by Hyundai, and Hyundai's still trying to kind of divest responsibility from this, even though they're the sole owners. It's just kind of absurd. And the Department of Labor is calling out this absurdity. The Department of Labor is saying, that's absurd. You were the employer and you were responsible and you had responsibility, and so we are naming you in this lawsuit as well as Smart. So that's what they are doing with Hyundai, and so this child labor story is relevant. But in Iowa, there's been a movement across the country to roll back child labor regulations to try to make child labor regulations more lax, to make it more easy for employers to take profits from the bodies of children and things like this. And Iowa has been at the leading edge of this, much like Arizona has been at the leading edge of the school privatization movement. Iowa has been at the leading edge of the movement to roll back child labor laws, to such an extent, actually, that they have passed a law that contradicts federal labor law. KCCI in Des Moines points out that currently the state law says, and this is newly amended state law says that 14-year-olds can work as late as 9 p.m. on a school night. On a school night, 14 years old, getting off work at 9 p.m. Iowa lawmakers says, that's great. That sounds awesome, and there's not going to be any negative ramifications from that. 14-year-olds should be able to work as late as 9 p.m. on a school night and 11 p.m. in the summer. I mean, this is just really, really grotesque and absurd kind of exploitative stuff. And that contradicts federal labor law. Federal labor law says that teenagers must be off the clock by 7 p.m. on school nights, which that's reasonable, and 9 p.m. in the summer. Again, those sound reasonable to me, right? Extending this for 2 hours, there's no reason for it, but Iowa did it. And so now Iowa businesses are in this situation where state law contradicts federal law. And so obviously the thing that you do there is follow federal law, because federal law supersedes state law. But some Iowa businesses are complaining to the news saying, we don't know what to do. We're being fined by the Labor Department, but I thought that it was okay because the state said it was okay. And I'm not joking. That's literally what's going on. That's literally what's going on. KCCI says one Iowa restaurant owner is facing fines of over $100,000, and they are saying that, oh, look, we thought we were following the law because we were following the state law, and so we thought we didn't have to follow federal law anymore. And it's just absurd kind of stuff that they are, and really the thing here is, I think, the thing that they want to do is they want to force this lawsuit from the federal government, from the U.S. Department of Labor. They want to get it in federal court, and they want to appeal it to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court overturn the Fair Labor Standards Act. Ultimately, that's what these freaks want to do, right? They want to get rid of not just child labor. They would like to get rid of the minimum wage federally, totally.
They would love to be able to do that. They would love to be able to get rid of requirements for overtime. That's another aspect of the Fair Labor Standards Act, that legally you have to pay employees time and 1/2 their rate of pay for hours worked over 40 in one work week. These are, and so I think that's what's going on. I think they want to totally roll back the child labor portion of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and also everything in the Fair Labor Standards Act. So I think this is very concerning, and it's silly in that, obviously, and these employers know that. These employers know that when federal law contradicts state law as it relates to employment, what you should be doing is following federal law. Because you're not going to go wrong by, the state of Iowa is not going to come and fine you because you don't have children working past 7 p.m., right? There's no risk in that. There's no risk in just having 14-year-olds get off work by 7 p.m. on a school night. There's no risk in that. There's obviously risk in blatantly violating federal law and then going out and saying, "Oh no, it's just I didn't know. I'm just stupid." And this also contradicts, the idea that business owners are, they should be the ones running society because they're so much smarter than everybody else, right? That's who we should trust to run everything. And so, if actually it is the case that these business owners were so stupid as to think that, oh, the state has changed the law, now I can just operate in blatant violation of federal law, then that's actually very concerning about the extent to which we should be trusting these people to be running our societies, right? That actually kind of says something about maybe we shouldn't be trusting business owners to run societies. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should be putting workers in charge. But
I know. I mean, it's so silly because it's like, if you live in a state that legalizes marijuana, not to get on a plane with it. People understand that federal law is the law of the land.
Exactly. I didn't even think about that, but these same people would point and laugh at a pothead who got on a plane and had the TSA take away their pot and say, obviously you're so stupid. Just because Oregon changed their law doesn't mean it's legal federally. Look at this pothead. He's so dumb. But that's exactly what's going on with the child labor stuff. That's a good point, Wendy. Yeah, very frustrating. Very frustrating what's going on. But yeah, like Reese says in the chat, not surprising at all. Just looking at the YouTube chat, we've got some 32, 35 people watching. We've had 40 people watching at different points in the program, and only 26 likes. What's going on there? That's insane.
14 people are unsatisfied.
14 people are, this is a strong word, but they might even be called scabs. I don't know if so. I don't know if we have 14 scabs listening to us on YouTube, but if that's you want to correct your behavior quickly and press the like button so that you're no longer a scab. So Leanne in the chat says, hair's looking great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
The important stuff.
Yes. I want to make sure that we include the important things that the people participate in the chat. Konstantin Garfield Zovosky, also known as Jared. I only know that because I know him.
Just blowing up his alias.
Well, he's kind of the one doing it, he's talking about it, so he knows. He knows what's going on. He knows what he's doing. But Jared, he's the president of the NASA union, of the rocket scientists over at NASA. He says heading down to the IBEW hall to try and get a TA vote finalized. So if you are if you're an employee at NASA and you're a rocket scientist or engineer, you're unionized, by the way. You should know that you're unionized, and you should join the union, and you should participate in the union. You should be a steward because Jared needs more help. Perfect, thank you. Jared needs more help with that. But yeah, they just negotiated a new tentative agreement, a new contract with Marshall, with the Marshall Space Flight Center, NASA over there. And so they're voting on it today at the IBEW Hall on Clinton. So if you work at NASA, you're a rocket scientist and engineer, head over there and
and vote. So there you go. Jon Melrod in the chat. I'm sure I'm too late. No, you're not. You want to jump in the Zoom, we can go ahead and get you on, actually. And no worries about that. I apologize for not making sure that I was referring to Pacific time. We have a caller on the line, another caller, this caller from a 714 area code. Let's bring them on the air. 714 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Buenos dias, comrades. Jose Francisco Negrete calling from Anaheim, California. Teamster Local 952 and also part of Teamster Mobilize. I just wanted to call and hope you guys are cool with me calling in.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I just called to say a couple of things regarding the Teamsters. Like the movie, the classic Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. We have some good stuff. We have Teamster Local 630 that organized 2 cannabis warehouses, I think 2 weeks ago. Congrats on that. And then Teamster Local 186 organized some Frito-Lay workers too. So that's pretty good on that front. You know, that's the news that all Teamsters should be hearing and, you know, grabbing inspiration from. And the bad, we have Teamsters in the same local, Local 630 that are on strike, Smart and Final workers in both facilities, the City of Commerce Distribution Center and the Riverside Distribution Center. So any comrades in Southern California, please show up and show your solidarity, you know. So they're in negotiations, so I guess they had a breakdown in talks. So, you know, the local and the bargaining board, the bargaining committee decided to step it up and take a picket line. You take an action. So, you know, it's probably ULP action. So go out there and show support. And then now when it comes to the ugly, once again, I'm just, I don't know if you're supposed to get numb to it, or they're conditioning us to keep on accepting that a trade union, the president of a trade union, accepts a RNC speaking slot. I mean, I'm just tired of Sean O'Brien just not understanding the principles of trade unionism. You know, we have here a former president who vows to get rid of communists, socialists, you know, or anybody that hates America. So any criticism of the United States and the United States, whether it be an economic policy, whether it be a foreign policy, whatever it may be, you're going to be labeled as a hater. You hate your own country. You know, it's like, does Sean O'Brien want to get rid of all the red from the Teamsters? You know, and then shame on some of these, you know, so-called leftist organizations that, you know, propped up this clown, you know, Sean O'Brien. You know, DSA, labor notes, and of course the biggest, the junior partner in all this, TDU. And some parts they refer to TDU now as turd. because of what's happening. Don't you guys see what he's doing? He wants to get rid of all the reds. You know, as a communist, you know, the First Amendment protects me to have my political views and to express my political views. You know, but under a Trump regime or dictatorship on his first day, are we going to get that? You know, are they going to come down and going after all the reds? I'm like, come on now. I mean, we just have another great news earlier this week. I forgot to mention the ALU JFK, you know, affiliation. You know, as part of Teamster Mobilize, I want to welcome them. Hopefully, we'll work with JFK 8, LBJ 5, I think it is, a facility across the street from JFK. And KCVG, the Amazon Air Hub. I hope myself and other Teamster Mobilize gets to work with them to you know, bring real democracy and real change into our union, and a union that understands the principles of trade unionism, not just bows down to the bosses. This is what it is. It's just bowing down to the bosses. You just saw in Alabama, well, I forget where the Mercedes-Benz plant is at in the South.
Yeah,
you saw how
Alabama, Vance, Tuscaloosa.
You saw how the GOP went after the UAW and that vote. They all rallied around. The governor, senators, representatives, they all rallied around to make sure that didn't happen. They fell 600 votes short, I believe. Which is still pretty. It's. I'd rather lose by 600 than by just get a 2-1 vote against it. But you just see it, and you want to speak in front of these individuals. Doesn't he understand there's a Project 2025 playbook, and it has I don't know how many pages, 80 pages dedicated to Department of Labor, what they want to do to labor. I mean, come on now, And then this past week, the IBT posted a photo of him and Secretary Treasurer Fred Zuckerman, having a meeting. I think it had to do with Delta Airlines. And then on our General President's laptop, it says Local 25, Boston Mafia. I mean, what the fuck is going on? I mean, are we conditioning ourselves to accept all this as Teamsters? I thought we got rid of the mafia. And you have a sticker on your laptop that says that? Come on now. I mean, this is just outrageous. I just hope more Teamsters just wake up. It's like, you know what? Just be outraged about it. You can't accept this, You can't accept us talking to a political organization that wants to destroy us, wants to destroy all. They're just not alone. The Teamsters want to destroy labor because they know labor is the only way that you're going to redistribute wealth, and you're going to fight for dignity and respect. That's the only thing we have is our collective power, our collective force as one to stand up to the bosses. And you want to speak in front of the bosses, people that are just lapdogs for the bosses. I'm not saying the Democrats are the same thing too.
Right.
But why you go accept an invitation to the RNC, and the former president wants to make the Teamsters great again? What is there coded language in that? What do you mean he wants to make the Teamsters great again? He wants all the Teamsters to be the monolithic in our thinking. That's what a fascist wants. Be monolithic in your thinking. If you don't prescribe to these ideas, well, you're not one of us.
Right.
So at some point, the Teamsters, the rank and file, need to express their concerns about this. What's going on? Because we're just becoming a laughing stock. You think Sarah Nelson wants to talk to Sean O'Brien after the moves he's pulling? I'm sure the Democratic Party would rather have Sean Fain speak in one of those cushy, primetime slots, 5:30, 6:30, whatever slot it is, than have Sean O'Brien speak.
Yeah, I think it's really concerning. Appreciate the call, Jose.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, there was a lot there. Just on him speaking at the RNC, that in and of itself is like just in a void. There, that's one thing, and I think not necessarily a cause for, I could imagine a scenario, and I could have imagined a scenario, before Sean O'Brien was elected, that he gets to speak at the RNC and he just does a barn burner and says, fuck you, right? And walks off the stage, right? I could have imagined that before Sean O'Brien was elected, and in particular because of his history with Trump, because this is something that that Rick Smith pointed out during his spat with Sean O'Brien. Rick Smith has been very publicly critical. Rick Smith has a program on the radio and on TV called The Rick Smith Show. He's a working Teamster. He does this, while he's off, kind of like we do, but it's a lot bigger. His show's a lot bigger. He's been publicly feuding with Sean O'Brien, and Sean O'Brien actually publicly threatened Rick Smith. Said you are risking your positive relationship with your union going forward if you do not publicly apologize.
Not great behavior.
That's insane, absolutely ludicrous behavior. I said on Twitter that's like, that's boss shit. And like, I joined the labor movement to fight boss shit, right? I mean, that's insane. And Rick Smith, to his credit, did not apologize. And instead of apologizing, he read from a Facebook post from Sean O'Brien from 2018, where Sean O'Brien was attacking then president of the union, or he was either attacking then president of the union, Jimmy Hoffa Jr., or it was his successor, something Verma. Whoever it was that was the Hoffa successor. He was attacking them for playing footsie with the Republicans. I mean, literally, not even as bad as he's doing now. I think what the Teamsters were doing in 2018 was just like not commenting on it, right? Whereas Sean O'Brien is now publicly playing footsie, meeting with Trump and all this kind of stuff.
Speaking at the convention,
yeah. And Sean O'Brien was attacking the Teamster leadership in 2018 just for not saying anything about the dangers of the Trump administration, right? I mean, so this is like a real kind of marked shift in O'Brien's public persona and his public relationship to the Republican Party. It's very concerning. And so, if it were the case that I had any hope at all that Sean O'Brien was going to go to the RNC and do a barn burner and leave the stage, with both middle fingers out, I would be like, hell yeah, brother, go ahead and do it. But I don't think that's what's going to happen, and I'm very concerned about it. And the Jennifer Abruzzo, for example, the general counsel of the NLRB, she spoke at a Chamber of Commerce event, right? But it wasn't exactly like, screw you, or, but it was very stern. It was not a like, oh, we're here to cooperate. It's like, y'all are breaking the law. You're doing it too much, and we're going to get you. We're going to get you. There's a new sheriff in town. The sheriff's me, and you got to follow the law now, actually. So, there's a time and place for stuff like that, and if you get invited to places like that, you can take advantage of it. I'm not opposed to that. Bernie Sanders speaks on Fox News with some amount of regularity. But you can't be doing this, you cannot be sacrificing your principles to get those opportunities. And I think that's what's happening, and O'Brien is really legitimizing the Republican Party, I think, in ways that are very, very, very concerning. And another example of this is actually, Ben, do we still have that clip loaded up of the Sean O'Brien and Markwayne Mullin backpedaling? Okay, no worries. Well, I'll just tell y'all about it. Sean O'Brien was on Neil Cavuto recently on Fox News. He goes on Neil Cavuto's with some amount of regularity. And he basically, apologized about his behavior with Markwayne Mullin in the Senate, where they kind of both of them pretended like they were going to fight each other and all this kind of stuff. And he was like, yeah, go ahead and play this, because it's like, what the hell?
We do remember that one with Markwayne Mullin, the senator, and I just want to refresh people's memories in case they forgot, where it got a little heated. Take a look.
Let me read what the last one said. It said, greedy CEO who pretends like he's self-made. Sir, I wish you was in the truck with me when I was building my plumbing company. Myself and my wife was running the office, because I sure remember working pretty hard and long hours. Pretends like he's self-made. What a clown. Fraud. Always has been, always will be. Quit the tough guy act in these Senate hearings. You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy. Sir, this is a time, this is a place. If you want to run your mouth, we can be two consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it.
Is that your
All right.
solution every poll?
No, sit down.
Sorry, Eric.
Sit down. Look at you. You know, you're a United States Senator.
All right, Bernie Sanders might have saved the day there. I don't know. But every time I look at that, I was like, how close did it get? I mean, it never came to blows, but you both had promised to get together sometime, maybe at a diner. Remember, I was going to broker something at a Denny's or an IHOP. You never called me. Did you ever get together?
Well, I think you helped facilitate a ceasefire. And we actually did meet and get together. And look, there's a lot of things we agree to disagree on. I think the one thing we agree on is that, you know, we're both in positions where, you know, maybe we could have acted a little differently in those hearings. But at the end of the day, you know, I have a constituency to serve, and he does as well. And it was very cordial, and hopefully we can work together. And that's one of the focus we've been working on as an organization, is building relationships.
So it was amicable. I mean, you didn't come to blows at wherever you got together. Was it a diner or at free?
No, it was just a small little restaurant.
Okay. Were you
nothing
recognized?
fancy.
You're both recognizable people.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a pretty small place, so I don't think the folks that run it pay attention. But, you know, it's no secret that we met.
Okay.
And look, I mean, it's like anything else. You know, sometimes you take a step back and think about it. And, you know, we can hopefully he can support some of our issues moving through the Senate. And, you know, he has a lot of union members that are Teamsters in Oklahoma. So it helps him as well to be, you know, working with us on certain issues.
So there you go. I mean, that's just absurd. Like, if you're going to do this big tough guy thing and like, I'm willing to fight a U.S. senator, like, you know,
throw some punches.
Or at least don't apologize for it. Like, if you're going to do the thing, like, you can't back down later. I mean, personally, like, that's not my style. I would not have done that. And I think there's a good amount of truth about his statement that, you know, we're in positions where it was like not becoming of us to act so silly, right? Okay, sure. If you're going to do that, then do it in the moment. Do it in the moment and be the bigger person in the moment. But if you're going to go down there and be silly, you can't go around apologizing to these freaks. Like, you do it and you leave it out there, and then there you go. But so, like, you know, playing footsie with Trump, speaking of the RNC, now basically apologizing to Markwayne Mullin. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's really, really, you know.
And I do think Jose made a good point that it's not just Republicans. I don't think like the Democrats are coming to like save labor either. But it, you know, especially like in an election year, all of a sudden everyone wants to like, you know, look back at the glory days of unions and praise the workers and really ignore, you know, who's driving the labor movement now and the workers now, and like how policies can affect us. And it's definitely not a just one party thing. You know, it's mostly like everyone in power is against the workers.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you're going to be speaking at the DNC, you should be doing something of a barn burner, and you know, saying screw you, you know. Like,
and I think, you know, as far as I've seen, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like UAW has signed on to like ceasefire agreements for Palestine.
Yeah, Teamsters have not.
Yeah, and like, but also like, you know, been somewhat supportive of like Joe Biden. So like, you can like have your values and like still engage with politicians.
Right.
But like, you know, you have to be intentional about it, and you have to have you know, a good sort of backbone.
Yeah, and you gotta, if you're gonna engage in real politique, you gotta actually engage in real politique, and doing that, if you're gonna do that, that requires, you know, being nicer to Democrats than Republicans, I think, because, and you know, the funny thing is that there is probably no single bigger beneficiary of the Biden administration than the Teamsters. Because in the American Rescue Plan was the Butch Lewis Act. It had tens of billions of dollars to save distressed pension funds. And like, I can't remember how much it was. It was like 20 or 40 or 60 billion of it.
Right.
Was just a check to the Teamsters Central States Pension Fund, right? I mean, like, there's no other, that was the largest single beneficiary of the Butch Lewis Act was the Teamsters. And the idea that they're being so weird about, you know, I mean, they're risking if Joe Biden and the Democrats win, they're risking their relationship and the gains that they can get for their members from the Democrats.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's very little that you're going to be able to get from the Republicans. And while you're getting that from the Republicans, they're going to be trying to kill the rest of us, right? And that's another thing that we need, you know, I don't know. It's very frustrating, and I agree in large part with a lot of what Jose was saying, and as does Joe from Decatur. Amen, Jose, in Facebook. So we have Jon Melrod on the Zoom. Jon Melrod is a current human rights attorney and former auto organizer in Milwaukee at the American Motors Corporation. Jon, welcome to the program. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for inviting me, and I'm glad I'm finally here. I kind of confused the time a bit, but I appreciate your patience.
No worries, absolutely, and thanks for hopping on, and thanks for being willing to talk to us. And so, you know, your book, and I have it at home. I don't have it with me, but I have finished reading it. It's called Fighting Times, Organizing on the Front Lines of the Class War. And you wrote your book because, you know, you got a cancer diagnosis, and there is good reason to believe that it's associated with your work in industry. And so your kids have asked you, you know, why did you do that? You know, you got a college degree and all this. And so you wanted to kind of write a memoir and explain, you know, the importance in your mind at that point, and I think still to this day, the importance of organizing the working class, you know, as such, you know, building labor power for working people and believing in that as an avenue towards social change, you know, really over and above a lot of other things, right? You know, you came out of Students for a Democratic Society, and after the split, you were part. You know, there was a bunch of different organizations in Students for a Democratic Society, and some of them went, you know, with you know, a terroristic route, and some of them were more. Some of them were, I don't know. Maybe there was some electoral groups. I can't remember exactly. There was a bunch of groups, but the group that you went out of the SDS with was focused on labor as kind of the central key to social change. So, can you explain that to us? What is it about labor that convinced you those, you know, I don't know, I don't want to make you feel too bad, 40, 50 years ago? What was it about labor that convinced you all those years ago that labor is the key to changing the world, and what do you think about that theory now?
You know, there's an anecdote in the book that I think really speaks to the political trajectory that I followed. And you're right, there were not that many of the student groups after SDS broke up that had a political view that to really change society in a fundamental way, it required mobilizing the working class. That it couldn't just be students in student towns on campuses that had been the most active during the Vietnam War, but it required a much larger movement where the power lay, which was with the working class. And for me, there was a specific story, even as a college student, that led me into the direction that I followed, going into an auto plant for 13 years. And I think it was my freshman year, so we're talking about 1968 or 69. I had gone to a lecture by the president of the United Farm Workers in Wisconsin. And that was not directly affiliated with Cesar Chavez's farm workers, but we were hoping to grow in that direction. And we were organizing in the canneries in Wisconsin, in the fields in Wisconsin, as well as on the campus at the UW-Madison to build support for the farm workers movement. I was asked to come speak with Manuel Salas, who was the spokesman for the United Farm Workers in Wisconsin, to a group of steelworkers who were participating in the School for Workers in Madison, which is traditionally where workers come from around the state to spend a week in Madison, studying labor history, studying time study, grievance handling, etc. And at that school that particular week, it was United Steelworkers from around the country. And Manuel spoke and explained how the conditions in the fields were such that farm workers didn't have bathrooms, that didn't have breaks, that pesticides were being sprayed right over the heads of the farm workers. And we have been part of the grape boycott that was an international and national boycott of grapes picked in California from 22 of the grape fields that were on strike, demanding a United Farm Workers contract. At the end of that discussion with the steelworkers, we asked them if they would join us on a picket line in front of Kroger's grocery store where we were boycotting grapes. One of them put up their hand, and I was a 1960s college kid, and I had long hair, and we were part of the counterculture. And I looked at the guy getting up, and I wondered, am I in the wrong room? I mean, he looked like a typical steel worker. Not to be stereotypical, but he had a big belly, he had short hair, and in those days, the cultural divide, in one sense, was as great as it is today, except that there were many more people on our side of it. And he put up his hand and he says, I make a motion that the steel workers show Brother Salas what we do when we form a picket line. I make a motion that all of us join the picket line this Friday at the Kroger's grocery store. Picket line came around, about 50 steelworkers were out there, militant as hell, belly to back type picketing, not letting people come into the grocery store. And then at a certain signal, all those steelworkers went in, filled up grocery carts with the ice cream on the bottom, lined them up at the checkout counters, and just walked out of the store singing Solidarity Forever. And when they got to the one lyric that said, we shall build a new world of the ashes of the old, I said, that's where I want to be. Because that's a hell of a revolutionary sentiment, a hell of a sentiment for changing the whole society, to build a new society out of the ashes of the old. And that's where I made my decision that when I left Madison, I would go into the working class to organize and to spread the word of building a new society.
I think that really, I think that's a great encapsulation of the, of why labor is, and I agree with the theory that labor, if you want to change the world, you want to make the world better, labor is really at the center of what's going to have to happen. And I think that's a great explanation of it and how it can bring people, from disparate backgrounds to supporting the same, to supporting each other. I've even had something kind of similar. One of our first ever interviews on this program was with two nurses who had just been key in organizing a union at their hospital in Pennsylvania. And one of them described himself as a conservative constitutionalist. I can't remember. He had some other silly adjective. And the other one said, I'm an ultra liberal or whatever, right? So these are, clearly kind of at opposite ends of one another. But the amount of love and respect they had for one another and for their industry and the job that they perform and their coworkers was really evident. And actually the conservative, and I could even tell, and I need to follow up. It's been almost 4 years. I need to follow up with these guys and have them back on again to see how they're doing. But the conservative, you could see that he was undergoing as a 50-year-old man, right? This is not some young guy who's being politicized. This is an older gentleman who's been around, who has already kind of got set in his ways. He was undergoing at the time something of a political transformation, right? And he was talking about how prior to organizing this union with my black women colleagues, I was really upset at the Black Lives Matter movement. I really thought it was bad. I can't remember if he thought it was a terrorist organization or what, but he was very, antagonistic towards it. And he said, I still can't say that I agree with every single thing that they say, but I understand it now after having had these black women in my home and having dinner with them and being in their homes and having dinner with them and talking about having a union and talking about fighting for our first contract. It's really transformative and beautiful, and something that you can create a new world from the ashes of the old. And it's it's a beautiful song and a great testimony. And that testimony from your book is actually counterposed to another interaction that you had with steelworkers that really kind of showed the kind of the different ways that these groups can interact with one another in one situation where they are being kind of used against solidaristic action, and in another where they are being part of solidaristic action. Can you talk about when you were, opposing the Vietnam War and you were, basically being attacked by these people in factories?
Yeah, well, that was way early. I'm really dating myself on this one, but in give me 1 second. It would have been 1967. There was a national day of shutting down induction centers to protest the Vietnam War. And I was in high school at that time in Vermont, and we organized a group of high school students to go over to Manchester, New Hampshire, where the induction center was, to picket and show the recruits that they were bringing in to the induction center that there was opposition to the war. And when we came into the town, I'll never forget, I assumed that people would greet us and understand why we were there and coming in. And hanging from the windows of the old brick factories in Manchester, where they used to make shoes and textiles, and these are back in the days when it was a vibrant economy in New Hampshire, industrial economy, they had hung banners out of the windows that said "Better dead than red," and commies go home, and that type of sort of mindless reaction to what we were doing. And it stuck with me for many years. That is, why aren't these guys whose kids that are going to Vietnam understanding why we're standing up for them and us? And to show you how far the pendulum could swing, when I went to work in auto in 1972, the first time I ran for union steward, and I was in a very unique auto plant. We had one steward for every 35 employees on the line, and that steward only had to work a half hour a day and was paid by the company for the rest of the day for union business. We had a right to strike over all grievances, and we had 100% voluntary overtime. So it was a very progressive rank and file led local, very unusual. It had survived the Ruther days. Most people think that Ruther was a great hero of the working class and had built the UAW. Fact be told, if you go back in the history, and it's in my book, when Ruther came to power and kicked out the leftists, the radicals, the socialists, the Reds in the UAW, he transformed it step by step into a union that was based less and less on the rank and file and more on statesman-like bargaining with the auto companies. And he gave up the right to strike, stewards for every 35 individuals, and voluntary overtime to get some better wages, to get some COLA on the contract, to get some vacation time. And that was really misleadership, because the power of the union had grown out of the fact that the rank and file on the shop floor could take direct action to fight grievance, to fight racial discrimination, to fight women's being paid separate amounts per hour than the men next to them. And the first time I ran for steward, I drove three other guys to the union hall to vote. And then there was me. That made 4 of us. When I went back into the factory the next day, I had only gotten 3 votes. That meant one of the guys I drove out there didn't even vote for me. And I was pretty shell-shocked. I had these high hopes that I was going to be recognized as a union leader and as a militant, and it didn't come to pass at first. After I had worked there 13 years or so, when I ran for the bargaining committee, some 4,000 people voted for me. And that was after 13 years of being on the line, of leading direct actions, of leading walkouts, of leading work stoppages, that people came to respect me. That what was not the main issue was my politics. The main issue was I was seen as somebody who had class consciousness, who had militancy, and stood up for all the workers, regardless of their politics, regardless of their race, regardless of their sex. And that transformed those workers in a huge plant of 7,000 people to where I was looked at and respected as a leader because what I believed in and what I practiced every day.
Right. And that's the, I think, much more than having the perfect kind of political line is, doing the work. And I was listening in preparation for the interview to some other interviews that you gave and one with Barry Eidlin. Y'all spoke about the mundane work that goes into being a union steward or a union activist, a union member, a participatory union member, and the politics of a person really are less important, I have found, and you have found, to getting your coworkers to trust you. It's less important than being good at the mundane stuff, being somebody that is there, being somebody that is respected, even being somebody that's good at their job, right? It's difficult to...
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really do actually have to be good at your job to be an effective unionist, right? Because if you're not good at your job, one, your employer could fire you and then be rid of the whole problem, and it would be difficult to make the case, at the National Labor Relations Board to get you rehired. But for another, nobody enjoys working with a layabout, somebody who sucks at their job and who everybody has to pick up their slack for. It's not fun to work with those people, right? And so it's if you are associated with that kind of lackadaisical work ethic and you're not good at your job, then the union or then the employer might actually just keep you around and have you be a scapegoat for the union, right? And say, look, the union's keeping this lazy ass guy around, and wouldn't your job be so much easier if I could fire him? But look, it's the union's fault, right? And anyway, I don't know. I got on a tangent, but
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. I mean, that was one of the things that I said when I went in. As hard as it was to work on that assembly line, 8 hours a day, putting in taillights on one car per minute, I never once let up in how hard I worked or how people viewed my work. But to show you that what people will respect you for, it was only 3 or 4 months after I had gone to work. I was still a kid. I was 21. And I didn't get a break in the morning. And on the assembly line, they'd have relief people come by, take your job for 5 cars, and you take a break. Well, I didn't get my morning break. And everybody around me, particularly the high seniority workers, started saying, Melrod, are you some kind of company man? I said, what do you mean? They said, don't let them fuck with you like that. Take your break. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, fucking walk off the line, go sit down in the cafeteria and take a break. And I said to myself, damn, I'm going to get fired for this. And I don't want to be in this plant for 4 months and be out of a job. But I did it. I took the taillights, I threw them in the car, I walked off, and I sat down in the cafeteria. And I saw the foreman headed for me, swinging his arms, coming up the aisle. And he started yelling, Melrod, you're fucking fired. Get out of this factory. Don't come back onto the line. And I said, oh, shit. This is serious. My steward walked up. out of nowhere, somebody had alerted him, and he walks up to me and he says, Melrod, you go back to work. He said, the contract says you got a right to a break. That foreman can't fire you for you exercising your right to break. And that steward had a little blue button. Back in the old days in the UAW, stewards all wore blue buttons, and we were called blue button stewards. And I said to myself, when he sent me back to work, and I saw that foreman just raging to be put down like that, I said, someday I'm going to be a blue button steward. And that became my first goal, is to be a steward, which I became a year later on the next election, and worked my way up to chief steward, to department chairman, to the education committee. I was part of the delegation that was sent to France to meet with the unions at Renault, the French auto company that bought American Motors. And I was elected to the bargaining committee. So it just shows you, if you put your head down and you go to work. And I've said to young socialists who get out in front of the factory selling a socialist newspaper, that's not the way you organize people. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying you're a socialist, but you got to first dig in and be there every day and show people that you got the courage to stand up to the boss, that you have the courage to defend other people before you start talking to people about socialism or transforming society in its entirety. So those are a lot of important lessons that I hope to have conveyed in the book. We've sold about 3,700 of them, which is, I'm told, very good for an independent author with an independent book label.
Yeah, where can people just and I'll make sure to plug this again at the end. But where would people go to buy that book? And I think at 50% off right now.
It's at 50% off, so I think the book is only about $7.50. So we put it on sale because we're running low. We had printed 4,000 copies and we're down to the last couple hundred. But if people go to pmpress.org, that's the publisher, and they put in Fighting Times or Jon Melrod, the book will come up and you can order it at that 50% discount. No need for a discount code. It's just been put on sale. But I think, you know, for a lot of your listeners, it's a lot of young people have come to me and said how inspired they were by reading the book. And, you know, the brother who was here from Teamsters Mobilize, a whole group of Teamsters Mobilize activists read the book and then talked to me about it, which was really exciting to be with young people, because these guys are standing up not just to the companies, but to O'Brien. And to me, O'Brien is a gangster, no different than when the Hoffas ran the union. You know, you don't go to talk to the Republicans about labor. The Republicans are anti-labor. So let's get that straight before you even consider the idea. So there's a lot that we still got to do. We had hoped that O'Brien might be a reform candidate, and Labor Notes invited him to be a key speaker 2 Labor Notes ago. And I think a lot of us in the reform movement need to look at ourselves and say, look, don't fall for the promises, fall for the actions. You know, O'Brien did not prove himself on the ground in terms of what he could deliver for the Teamsters. And, you know, it's a mistake then to follow him politically when he goes to accept an invitation from Donald Trump to speak about labor, because we all know, those on this program, those listening to this program, that Donald Trump is a class traitor, or maybe he's not. He's actually a class advocate for his class.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. He's not a class traitor. Yeah, he would be great. We would let Donald Trump, the class traitor, would be a much better person, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so, you know, back to the book, you wanted to write this kind of for your own kids and for posterity and kind of to explain, you know, some of the some of the reasons that even though, you know, the work was dangerous and you know, more dangerous even than it is today, even as it is still dangerous today.
why you felt like that was important, and fortunately, your cancer diagnosis was some years ago, and you've lived much longer than they anticipated that you would. And so, I think that's obviously, great for everybody, and great for your kids, and great for the folks that are able to read this book now because of that. But another reason for writing the book it was to talk to folks like, Jose and folks who are trying to do what they can to turn their unions into fighting militant organizations that are not afraid to take on the boss and not afraid to challenge union misleadership where that needs to happen. And so what are some of the key lessons that you think folks today need to learn from the history and activities of you and folks like you? Because there's a long line of reform movements, whether they're called that or not, in unions spanning decades. And what are some of the key lessons from those movements that you think folks should take?
Yeah. One of the most important things that defined our caucus, which was the Fighting Times Caucus, was that from the very beginning, we identified two pillars of our work in the factory. One was fighting white chauvinism. Anytime that we were in a situation where white chauvinism was being utilized by the company, we were there to oppose it. Whenever a Black worker was discriminated against in terms of a job assignment, in terms of treatment by a racist boss or foreman, we were there with a petition, with a group grievance, with an article in the Fighting Times. It was known that we would stand up on that issue and take whatever heat that came back at us. And that included, at one point, we were called on by the United League of Mississippi that put out a call. The Klan had revitalized itself in the South, and it was about I'm blanking out. Must have been the very early 80s. And we organized a busload of workers from the factory to go down there and to march with the United League against the Klan. And we caught a lot of heat. There were 7,000 workers in the factory. A lot of them were rural white farmers who worked on the farm part of the day and in the factory the other part. And they were, they reacted pretty negatively to us saying, look, we're going to go take on the Klan. But we went down there, we marched, and the irony of it was, I don't know if you'd call it an irony, actually, but as the bus pulled up, and in my book, there's a picture of this, it stopped in front of a building, and on the top of it, I read, Tupelo Police Department. And out walked 20 Klansmen with their robes on, with their pointed hoods, carrying axe handles, and they were the police. They had come out of the police station. And I said to myself, oh my God, who do you call when the Klan attacks you on the march, when the Klan are the police and the police are the Klan? And we marched, and it was a very successful, very inspiring march because it was led by a lot of young Black workers who had been to Vietnam, and that had changed the equation. In the first pickup truck that led the march, I walked up to look at what was in the bed, and it was filled up with weapons from Vietnam that these soldiers had brought back with them. So we had entered a new era, which was young Blacks were not going to take bullshit from the Klan and be intimidated by the Klan because they had already been to Vietnam and they had already seen what power they had in organizing with other Black vets to oppose the Vietnam War. And that was really an important lesson down there. But when we got back up to the factory, we put out a full description of the march, taking on the Klan, and explained why the Klan was anti-union and anti-working class, that they had always been utilized to bust unions. They'd been utilized, and if you look at it, it was Trump's father who was marching in New York in a Klan march about keeping blacks out of housing in New York. And he was one of the 6 people who was arrested. Now, that story should be told a lot wider than it is, that Trump is a direct descendant of a Klan leader. But when we went back into the factory, people all of a sudden began to understand and talk to us more about why we had been willing to put ourselves on the line, to go down south. And we translated that when we came back into how we saw the struggle in the plant, that we had a struggle against racism as hard as we did against a line speed up or, a change in our jobs that made the workload too unfair. So that was one plank. The second plank was the same treatment that women were being doled out was sexist, was male chauvinist. There were foremen going around telling women that they would give them a better job if they would sleep with them. And we exposed all of that kind of stuff in the Fighting Times newsletter. And, we gained a lot of respect for being willing to always take on those 2 battles and be at the forefront and doing it every day. I mean, if people get a copy of the Fighting Times, I think they'll learn a lot about how those struggles are so integral to the overall working class struggle that you on the job make that a part of what you do. Right. And if I could just briefly say to you that part of the lesson was I wanted to bring these lessons to young workers. I spent the last year and a half helping organize the Blue Bottle Independent Union, which are Blue Bottle coffee workers in the Massachusetts area. And, they've all read the book. And at first they said, oh, the other workers aren't interested in the union. There's been a total transformation. Once we petitioned for an election for certification and the union won the election, all of a sudden these same young workers that were hesitant and said people aren't that interested, their lives changed. They said every day we feel solidarity on the job. We feel like we're standing up for other workers. This has been the best thing that's happened in our lives. And now they're spreading that union to the West Coast. And it's an independent union because they didn't feel that any of the unions they talked to that were traditional business unions would in fact respect their rank and file democracy and their willingness to take action on the job to get conditions changed.
Right. And, just to have I don't know if this is, I'm not a very big theory guy, right? But I don't know if this is what you would call dialectics, but there's a flip side to the importance of sticking to principles and standing up to union misleadership and fighting for more when some people are saying it's not time yet. You can't do that. There's a flip side to that you really do have to you do have to know when you can't fight for more. When actually yes. when it actually is the case that fighting for more is going to be detrimental either to to the organization or so detrimental to the company that it goes under, or particularly I think the more common thing is the former than the latter. Typically companies are not actually at risk for going under from union demands and contract negotiations, but where you can see that a company is willing to destroy your organization if you don't accept something. There are times when you have to accept concessions, and knowing when those times are and appropriately counseling your members is just as important a part of being a good union militant as as maybe even the easier times of throwing shit at the walls, right? And you tell a really a really powerful and I could tell difficult story towards the end of your book, where you had to do
exactly that. And actually, you were faced with some people on the negotiating committee who were inclined to do the other thing, to not give appropriate counsel to the members, to try to act like they were the pure militants, and then they were voting down the contract because it was a sellout contract and all of this. And you were very antagonistic towards those folks. And so could you just explain to us the situation and why you felt like, the appropriate counsel is some amount of concessions, and then what you did to kind of wrangle in these people that were trying to run off the reservation and bring them back?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. And it's a really good point that you picked up out of the book, because it's oftentimes hard for us who are radicals and militants to sort of, exactly as you say, realize there's times when you've got to pull back, and you're responsible for people's jobs and their families and their livelihoods. And in 1985, we were confronted with a situation where Renault, the French automaker, was in over 50% ownership of American Motors. And Renault announced that they would be taking away, I believe it was 13 or 14 non-negotiable demands that were in our contract, because we still, in 85, had the best contract in the UAW. And regardless of what they said, we set out to fight it. And we called for a strike vote, and we had a unanimous vote to strike to save our jobs, to fight the concessions. And people were ready to walk out. People passed mass petitions with thousands of signatures demanding that we not concede the benefits of our contract. But, we had read, those of us who were activists, we had studied Automotive News, the industry newspaper for auto. We had studied the economy. We had studied what the situation was with Renault. And the fact of the matter was that the two Renault models that we were producing in Kenosha, Wisconsin, were being produced at a less cost in France, and that the unions in France were demanding that production be brought back to France so that they would have jobs. And we were confronted with a difficult situation in the end, because it became very clear that financially, economically, Renault could in fact move that work. And that it would have been easy to say, to hell with you, we're not accepting any concessions. But when we caucused amongst ourselves, the young radicals that were on the bargaining committee, we really realized that that could mean the shutdown of the plant. And that would mean that there would be no pensions paid to those people who were receiving pensions, and to those people who would be soon to receive pensions. And there would be no transfer rights for workers ever out of that factory. And it was really tough to come in and say to people, well, we feel like we've got to accept this, even though our tradition has always been to fight all concessions. The fact that we kept those rights that we had up until 1985, the right to strike, the number of stewards, and the voluntary overtime, that we were faced with a tough decision. And in the bargaining committee, there was a vote. And after we discussed it, there were two holdouts. And they were sort of loudmouth, we're never going to be called the sellouts, and I got up and I said, it's easy for you two to say that, because the rest of us here are going to make the decision that has to be made to save jobs for as long as we can, to guarantee pensions, etc. And they said, no, we're not going to be sellouts. And I said, look, I'm going to tell you something. If you don't get on board with the rest of us and vote with us to save what we can save, we're going to be at the gates tomorrow with a flyer putting out exactly what you're jeopardizing and exactly what you're not willing to have the courage to take a stand on. And in the end, the president of the union got up to the membership and said, would you rather vote to have no job, or would you rather vote to have a big three contract, which would keep us working? which would keep the engine factory working, which would guarantee the pensions of 17,000 retirees, which would grant transfer rights to all those people who in the future were still working here when this was bought by another auto company, which it was by Chrysler a year later. And literally thousands of workers got to transfer to Chrysler Pants and finish out their 30 years and secure good retirements. So sometimes you got to bite that bullet and be willing to stand up in front of people and take the hit to say, we've got to do this. But in the end, people respected us for doing that because people aren't dumb. They don't want to vote themselves out of a job. And, you know, you can psych people up and work people up into saying, to hell with the company, we're not taking any concessions. But we made the better decision of that. And I feel like, you know, it saved a lot of people, a lot of pensions and a lot of jobs going forward.
Right. I agree. The book is called Fighting Times, Organizing on the Front Lines of the Class War. You can get it from PM Press. It's a great book. There's some other stories in here that we obviously were not able to cover in particular. You know, just want to highlight as a teaser for the book. Hopefully you'll go and buy it. The story of Melrod was fired from American Motors, and over the course of a multi-year NLRB case, he was eventually rehired and walked back into the job with a big, like, comically sized check picture of his back pay that he got from the NLRB. Their newsletter, Fighting Times, was also sued for like $1 million in a lawsuit.
$4 million.
It was $4 million surreptitiously funded the lawsuit by American Motors. And in that, over the course of the hearing, you hear lots of, really just terrible stories about the supervisor. The supervisor was abusive both to women and animals, horrifically so. And they won. The spoiler alert is that they won. They did not, Jon Melrod did not have to write a $4 million check to the supervisor who sued him for defamation, was the claim in the newsletter. So really great book, some other good stories in there. Check it out. Fighting Times, Organizing on the Front Lines of the Class War. The author is Jon Melrod. Jon, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you too for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, folks. We have a, like I said earlier, you know, Adam is out. Adam is in Portland for work, I think. I think he's in Portland for work, for Alabama Rise at some conference or another. And but he did record something. We're going to be going a little bit late, obviously, but he recorded something last week that we wanted to share at the end of the program. So we're going to play this. It's about 10 minutes long or so, and then we're going to be rolling out. So here's that clip from Adam.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to the Valley Labor Report. We know we have some new listeners and subscribers, some folks who are maybe just discovering our stuff, or maybe you've heard of us but don't really know what we're about. So I wanted to take a few minutes to share who I am, why I'm involved in this project, and why I think it matters. To briefly introduce myself, I'm a lifelong Southerner, a father, a husband, and a working class activist. I've spent over a decade in the movement fighting for the better Alabama that I believe is not only possible, but necessary. I've worn and continue to wear multiple hats in the movement. In my day job, I'm a community organizer with the nonprofit coalition Alabama Rise, where we fight for poor and working folks in Montgomery. I helped organize the staff with CWA Local 3908, that's the Communication Workers of America, and I'm proud to be one of our reps on the bargaining committee. On the side, I work as a union stagehand with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE, Local 900. We do the behind-the-scenes production work for events at the Von Braun Center and Orion Amphitheater here in Huntsville. I'm proud to represent us at the North Alabama Area Labor Council, where I serve as a trustee and chair of our politics committee. And for the last 3 years, I've been a co-host and co-producer of the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk show, airing on 4 radio stations across 3 states, as well as online via YouTube, Facebook, and podcasts. I got my start as a high school history teacher, and I spent over 5 years representing Huntsville City Schools employees. History specifically, and education more generally, has always been really important to me because it opened my mind to new ways of thinking. It can empower folks to know the truth, and we can't forget that, even when it feels like we're shouting into the void. I've been active with a variety of campaigns, causes, and coalitions over the years because I figure we've got to try. Things can be better. They should be better. And it takes everyday people coming together to make things better. If we're serious about living up to the democratic promises of America, if we're to help preserve the future of humanity against the forces of greed, we have to organize everywhere, and that includes organizing in our workplaces and in our economy. Ultimately, I believe a better community, a better state, a better country, and a better world is possible, but only if we, the people, come together and fight for it. Throughout the history of our country, change has come from the bottom up. We've had to fight for every inch of progress with our people power. And it's people power that we need if we're going to have any chance of dealing with the multiple layers of crisis bearing down upon us. Labor unions are a critical source of people power. Labor unions are maybe the most critical source of people power. Labor unions are uniquely working-class institutions by their nature and are accountable to their members, a rare thing these days. Unions are uniquely democratic institutions with the potential to transform society. It's not what some folks want you to think, that unions are just another special interest group out to get whatever they can. Yes, unions are human institutions, and as flawed as the humans in them and leading them. But labor at its best isn't a special interest. It's the majority interest. Labor at its best is the cause of the vast majority of us, the cause of the working class. We know we saw a wave of people power from the 1930s into the 60s and 70s, which won significant gains for everyday people. We've also been living through the reaction to that. For the last 50 years, the ruling class has fought to claw back those gains we made. Make no mistake, there is a class war, and the working class has been getting its butt kicked for the last 5 decades. We've seen how unions have been shrinking during this era, and as labor power has decreased, inequality has skyrocketed with a massive redistribution of wealth to the top. We've seen the concentration of wealth and power at the expense of the rest of us. And in order for so few to have so much, while so many have so little, the system does all it can to keep the majority divided. Those in charge expend enormous resources to divide and conquer us in order to stay in charge. Media is, of course, one big example, and one area where we are losing to the corporate and far-right forces, which is why we do what we do at the Valley Labor Report. These last few years since COVID have brought some excitement to the labor movement, as it's clear more and more workers are fed up and are increasingly willing to do something about it. Popular approvals are at all-time highs for unions. But can organized labor meet the moment? Will this upsurge in militancy result in finally reversing the decline of union density and grow membership numbers in a real way? Will we actually tilt the balance of power back our direction? The big question facing us, as Hamilton Nolan recently wrote in his new book, The Hammer, is how can the labor movement, after dwindling for decades, turn itself into a force strong enough to bend politics in its own direction rather than being bent? Alabama has been at the heart of this potential labor resurgence. From the Amazon campaign in a Bessemer warehouse that captured the nation's attention to the long, grueling Warrior Met Coal strike by the United Mine Workers of America to the UAW's campaign to organize the non-union auto industry, Alabama has been a central site of class struggle in recent years, just as it has throughout our rich history, a history full of labor militancy and interracial organizing that we must reclaim. We've suffered some key defeats and setbacks, most recently at the Mercedes UAW election, but we've had some important wins. The Starbucks Workers United wave includes a store in Birmingham and, perhaps more impressively, a store in Scottsboro, where the youngest person who was on the organizing committee for the union drive was just 16 years old when they started. IUE CWA recently won not just a union, but a strong first contract at New Flyer, a clean bus manufacturer in Anniston with over 500 workers. That's party to a community benefits agreement featuring union neutrality and recognition provisions, which, by the way, is something the state of Alabama would now punish under the newly passed SB 231, which strips both state and local tax incentives away from any company that voluntarily recognizes a union. My local CWA 3908 has added not just my bargaining unit at Alabama Arise, but also some AT&T retail shops like Alliance Mobile in Selma and Prime Communications in Montgomery. Across the South, CWA has shown a willingness to organize small shops, and I'm really excited to see how they've spread unions at places like Wells Fargo bank branches. And my CWA siblings at United Campus Workers continue to do important higher ed public sector organizing, and they're fighting for living wages for workers at Auburn, University of Alabama, and Jacksonville State University. And despite the setback in Vance, UAW is committed to the fight down here for the long haul, with another campaign active at Hyundai in Montgomery, and workers in other places such as Toyota, Mazda, and Huntsville signing cards as well. The UAW's fight to organize the non-union auto plants in the South is one of the most important struggles for organized labor in the region since Operation Dixie in the 1940s, and these brave workers will need strong support from community coalitions if they're to win the voice on the job that they deserve. A lot of folks now recognize that we have to organize the South if we're going to save this movement. But we can't just talk about it, we have to be about it. It's why we're active ourselves, and it's why we devote our time and energy to this grassroots media project. We have to amplify the voices of working people in the American South, share our challenges and victories, and educate folks on the power of solidarity and collective organization. The forces against labor and against workers in Alabama and the South can seem overwhelming, with not just fierce resistance from the companies, but their alliances with virtually all of our civil society, from local and state government officials to the broader business establishment to even faith leaders and community institutions to various forms of media. But we can no longer allow Alabama and the South to be a bastion of anti-union reactionary dominance. The South's economic model, rooted in racism, has long been to offer capital access to cheap labor, generous subsidies, lax regulations, and rampant union busting. And as a result, by most any metric, we rank at or near the bottom of the entire developed world when it comes to quality of life. The organizing workers need the support of the broader community in order to be successful with these campaigns, and the broader community needs these workers to win these campaigns in order to uplift our communities. We have to have coalitions bigger and stronger and more diverse than those the other side can assemble. I know we can do it. So I hope you'll stay engaged with us and support this project however you can, whether it's chipping in a few bucks or spreading the word. Stay connected with us, subscribe to the channel, get on our email list, all that good stuff. We are definitely a grassroots project, relying on a combination of union-friendly advertising and donations from listeners like you. And to be quite honest with y'all, the budget is looking real tight this summer, so if you dig what we're about, please go to tvlr.fm/donate and throw us a few bucks. Encourage your network to do the same, and talk to your local or organization about sponsoring an ad. The bosses and politicians have their media, and we need media too. But beyond supporting the Valley Labor Report, I hope you'll get more involved in trying to make this world a better place. Get active in your local union and your local labor council. Join organizations that are doing good work. Build diverse relationships. Talk to and listen to people about the issues affecting us. It's going to take all of us doing what we can so that we can all win what we need. You know, when everyday working people, are able to come together across our differences and unite around our common interests, we can do amazing things. We want a safe, comfortable life for ourselves and our families. We want a better future for our kids. We want to be treated with respect. We want to have a voice. And we don't just want these, we need them, and we deserve them. To win, we need a mass movement rooted in love, justice, and solidarity. We need to respond to organized greed with organized people. We have to respond to organized hate with organized love. To build a future we can believe in, we have to organize and we have to fight. It is the diverse working class majority that spins the wheels of our society and creates such vast wealth. And it's long past time we unite and realize our power as the working class. Thanks again, y'all, and solidarity forever.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for the program today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Whitney, you have anything wanted to make sure we get to before we roll out?
Not specifically. Thank you for having me on today.
Thanks for hanging out with us. TVLR.fm/donate if you might like to make a one-time recurring monthly contribution. That's where you can do it. Subscribe to the newsletter, TVLR.fm/contact. Send us a note. We obviously, the last week in Southern Labor in particular is where we could use people letting us know about what's going on, because we would really love to be able to have more about, because we know that there are local union elections, like internal officer elections going on all the time. There are contract negotiations that are starting and continuing, and there are stories about that all the time. And most of that is never even public, right? And it's not because it needs to not be public, right? It's not because there's some classified information about, like, so-and-so just won the presidency of the local union, like we can't tell anybody about that. It's just because the unions don't think to tell anybody about it, right? And so if you're a part of a union and anything like that is going on, let us know, and we'd love to include it in the newsletter, tvlr.fm/contact. But that's going to be it for us today, folks. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you next week.